In an instant, the student's life changed. Li Fan found himself in an infinite star space with two files. The system confirmed the user's identification and offered to choose between two girls. The first picture showed a slender student in a white blouse. She is obedient and intelligent and will be inseparable from her master. The second girl looked very different. She is beautiful, rich, and independent. She has absolutely no time for her master. Li Fan flapped his eyes in surprise, trying to figure out what was going on. This dream was clearly mocking him. The young man poked at one of the images and squealed that he agreed he was choosing his wife. To his surprise, no one appeared near him. Suddenly, a small part of the space in front of him began to change and changed color to pink. First, the long legs of a girl appeared there. As if by magic, the girl's torso now manifested in the air along with her legs, as if someone was animating her. The last stage was the appearance of an independent and proud face with blonde hair. In this figure, everything was perfect. Having recreated the image of the beauty completely, the system notified the user that their choice had been successfully granted. Li Fan stared in amazement at the girl who had simply appeared out of nowhere in a few seconds. She looked real. The creature's eyes were still closed. The system recommended a thorough inspection of the object for flaws. The young man was thinking very badly now. The whole situation confused him a lot. It was only after a moment that he realized he had to check on the girl. But in that case, it must mean that this angelic creature belonged to him entirely. The thought made the boy blush. Things were starting off very well. Li Fan even hesitantly approached the girl, taking a closer look at the pretty face. The sudden sound of the alarm clock made him pull his head from the pillow and get up. He realized with horror that it was only a dream. He turned off the alarm clock and regretfully thought that this obnoxious object was ruining his dreams for the umpteenth time. Li Fan collapsed on the pillow again and sadly thought that he was actually a loser and could only dream of such beauties. Hanging his feet on the bed, the guy looked around his room with his clothes scattered all over the place. From behind the door, someone asked where Li Fan's room was. When he heard his name, he was frightened and crawled back under the blanket. He couldn't understand who the woman's voice belonged to. The door swung open. On the threshold appeared the same spectacular rich girl in black stockings, emphasizing her slender legs. Turning back around, the blonde beauty asked the bodyguards accompanying her to wait outside. The girl explained that her men were about to move the guy's belongings to her mansion. It is not far from the university. The long-legged beauty came closer and introduced herself. Her name is Anjue. Now they will go to the registry office together and get married. It turned out that the girl was indeed serious. After a while, the happy couple was already leaving the wedding palace. Li Fan held his marriage certificate with trembling hands and a red crust with gold embossing. He couldn't believe that he was really married. The realization that he had such a beautiful wife drove the young man crazy. He almost prayed to this document. The blonde, long-legged beauty with violet eyes was much better than any of the girls the guy had seen before. Li Fan sobbed with happiness. He couldn't believe that the excellent dream he had seen had fantastically materialized in real life. Two girls were passing by and discussing the newlyweds. It was clear to them from the first glance that the two were not suitable for each other. Suddenly, a melodious female voice spoke again. The girl said that everything that was happening was no longer a dream. She said that the young man will now often face the problem of choice. His future life would depend on it. Li Fan started twirling his head in all directions and cried out that he had something in his head. And Shue grudgingly fiddled. She didn't understand the reason for his exclamation. An old man approached them, leaning on a wooden cane. The bride asked the young man to say hello to her grandfather. The guy started to turn to the girl in surprise. Today the events were unfolding too fast, he couldn't think of anything. An elderly man in a sweater and jacket smiled at Li Fan. He proudly said that the young man's grandfather was a good man. He was happy that his granddaughter was getting married to a young man in 2 days. The boy asked how he knew the grandfather. The man looked off into the distance, stirring events in his memory, and stated that the boy's grandfather had saved his life in battle and shielded him from a grenade. Immediately after the war, he searched for his savior. Unfortunately, he was never able to find him and repay him for his noble deed. But now Li Fan had married his granddaughter and comforted the spirit of his legendary grandfather dwelling in heaven. The young man embarrassedly exclaimed that Anjue is in good hands. He promises to keep the girl safe. The bride blushed. The man laughed. He said cheerfully that he had no doubts about the young lad, and he knew that his granddaughter would be happy with him. The old man apologized that he couldn't stay and talk. He walked to the yellow limousine, citing business at the company. Li Fan asked in surprise why the girl hadn't told him earlier about how much their families were connected, and Shue replied that she shouldn't have said that. Turning the other way, the long-legged beauty ran away. The young man cried out in surprise and asked why she was leaving. The girl turned her head unhappily and replied that Li Fan should get to know the bride's family better. He was not interested in her opinion on marriage. The young man indignantly shouted that Anshu's grandfather had not said anything about her not wanting to get married. It turns out that he was just repaying Li Fan's grandfather's debt in this way. The girl says she doesn't care at all. She recommends that he just play his part until she tells him what to do next. The dark car left the parking lot. Li Feng remained standing with his arms spread apart. In the aftermath, Anzhu shouted that her boyfriend knows the address of her villa. From today onwards, they will live there together. Girlfriends witnessed the quarrel and gloating whispered that between a loser and a beautiful woman cannot be love. They will soon divorce. The whole street could hear the unhappy shouting from the window in the villa. The young man was very unhappy about what had happened. Li Fan belatedly realized that this was what the system meant when she mentioned the rich beauty. She didn't see him as a husband. Upon hearing that his status was very low and did not allow him to get such a girl, the young man angrily shouted that he repented and wanted to reselect the girl. Unfortunately, the choice could not be undone. The only thing left for the boy to do was to reconcile himself with his own choice. Li Feng clenched his fists and angrily shouted that he would still make her love himself. The system cannot be trusted. He still has a chance. The newlywed family, along with the girl's mother, lived in a large 3-story country mansion. Unfortunately, due to his low status, the young man here was in slave status and was now stroking the pink dress while humming a song. While ironing, the guy didn't like a few creases in the dress and took a closer look. The door of the room opened. Li Feng touched the red-hot iron sole plate in surprise and jerked his hand away with a cry. The spouse declared without a shadow of a smile that they had to go to grandfather's banquet. The young man angrily declared that they should knock. She frightened him, and Jue stated that she really liked the dress and demanded to give it to her. The guy warned her that she might get burned. He rushed to the closet and pulled out the hangers. The young man carefully hung the freshly ironed dress on them and handed them to his mistress. The girl smiled. She said that for a man, he was doing quite well at home. It's a pity he's still unemployed. Li Fan reminded in surprise that he was only a sophomore and couldn't go to work without a high school diploma. The girl said that a man like him would always find an excuse for his helplessness. She said that the boy had no chance of joining their family, and Zhu began to slowly undress. The young man immediately blushed and began to stammer in surprise. The girl stated that she wanted to change her clothes and didn't understand why Li Fan still hadn't left the room. As he continued to remove his dress, his wife-to-be scowled that all he lacked was the label of pervert. Thus Li Feng got married and found a legitimate wife. Unfortunately, the luxurious house with rich furnishings quickly disappointed him. He was forced to do laundry and ironing. The boy quickly got bored of it, and he threw another dress off the ironing board and onto the floor. The young man shouted that he couldn't take it anymore. The system is obliged to give him the opportunity to choose a wife again. The system administrator, in the form of a blue genie, reported that he could not affect the outside world or the environment. Li Feng angrily launched a stool with a round seat at him and demanded that the voice leave him alone in that case. A loud female voice shouted that the young man had gone mad. The boy immediately turned pale. He immediately recognized the displeased notes in his mother-in-law's voice. The woman shouted that he was making too much noise, and they had a guest in the house. The man in the gray suit asked in a quiet voice not to be angry with the young man. The tall guy came closer and introduced himself. His name is Lu Xiaoshuan. They are both university graduates. The woman frowned, saying that this classmate Anjui already had his own business, unlike some people sitting on the neck of his wife's parents. Xiaoshuan put his hand on the young man's shoulder and said that he and Li Fan are similar. They both liked the same girl, and he would seek her attention. The boy could barely contain himself. Not only was he living in a luxurious mansion as a slave, but now this. And Zhue came down the wooden stairs wearing a red dress. She asked in surprise why they were talking so loudly. Xiaoshuan ran up to the girl in a second and gently took her hand. He smiled and declared that her dress was simply beautiful, and Shui asked how he ended up here. The young man said he was giving her mother a ride and wanted to wish her grandfather a happy birthday. The girl glumly informed him that it was inappropriate. She had a husband. The mother-in-law grudgingly told her daughter that there was no need to rely on Li Fan. The boy was surprised. He claimed to be Anshu's husband. The woman angrily shouted that he should settle the car issue immediately if he considered himself legally married. Xiaoshuan smiled smugly and folded his arms across his chest. He stated that it was better for the guy to keep his mouth shut and keep his head down. Suddenly the system turned on again. Li Fan turned his head in surprise. He had no idea what was going to happen this time. The system became active again and offered to choose a brother. It could be a very rich older brother who despised the young man, or a younger brother. He is a simple-minded guy but will listen to the system user and everything. Li Fan stared dazedly at the screen. The system asked him to make a quick choice. Being in this dimension for a long time could cause one to lose consciousness. The young man wailed that every time this system appeared out of time, and it was really starting to piss him off. The boy shouted that this time he would not choose the best option. He was destined to have a younger brother. Heading to the car, the woman reprimanded her daughter for her son-in-law and chided him for not even knowing how to keep his mouth shut. At this moment, some guy walked up to the huge wrought iron gate of the mansion outside and called out to his older brother. Hearing someone else's voice, Li Fan was surprised. He had never imagined that his younger brother would appear in his life so quickly. The young man rebuked his older brother for not telling him about the broken car. He had to take the company car because of that. The mother-in-law cried out in surprise and angrily asked who he was, and Shu also saw this guy for the first time. The guy said he was Li Fan's younger brother. His name is Wang An. He'll give them a ride in a company limousine. Once outside the gate, everyone could see with their own eyes a long black car with its front lights on. All four of them clapped their eyes in surprise. It was not every time one could have such a fancy ride. Wang An asked everyone to get into the limousine in a friendly manner. He ran to the door and gallantly opened the back door for the girl, and Shui asked her mother to sit down. They shouldn't disturb Xiao Xuan. The young man angrily shrieked that Li Fang knew about the broken car. The joyful interlocutor proudly declared that he couldn't have been unaware of the incident in his house. The girl leaned out of the car and shouted goodbye that they should go. They would see each other later. Xiao Xuan muttered something to himself. As he escorted the car with his gaze, he cursed his rival who was able to know everything in advance and prepare. He vowed that he would still conquer An Shui. Fan, in the company of Shui, came to the banquet intended for her grandfather's birthday. Li couldn't understand why one would show off like that on a normal birthday. An suddenly gave a gift to the guy, saying he should give it to his grandfather. The young man asked why she was deciding instead of him. The girl was aware of the fact that he hadn't prepared anything, and so thought for him, which she reported, adding since he doesn't fit their status, he should communicate with everyone respectfully. Fan opened the box and saw a mountain ginseng root that was at least about 50 years old. Li thanked her. Zhu replied that she was not trying for him after all. He, as a husband, cannot not give anything so as not to embarrass her. The guy literally melted. At the mere sight of her, the system urged him not to be so naive. Asked if he regretted choosing her, the confident youngster stated he had everything under control and she would soon fall in love with him, which was rather presumptuous of him. At this moment, the young son-in-law saw Grandpa An, who in turn was surrounded by young girls, a system that Fan Yu would not be able to do that. The old man noticed his son-in-law and greeted the young man cheerfully. Smiling, Li mouthed that he couldn't help but come to such a celebration. At this time, Shuo flew into the banquet hall like a wild man. Xuan literally pushed people around and apologized for being late. Liu hurriedly handed his gift to the old man and wished him well. The enthusiastic grandfather remarked that he had a good heart, then opened the box that contained a 100-year-old ginseng root. The protagonist was crushed, realizing that this was the end. A smirking Shuo urged Li, showing his gift to his grandfather. The guests did not expect a worthy gift from the beggar guy, realizing that most likely the granddaughter bought it herself. One of the guests whispered in the old man's ear, telling him not to give away his jue to this rough-looking young man. Fan understood perfectly well that now one could not give a 50-year-old ginseng root. Suddenly, the system of life asked Li to make a choice. The guy couldn't understand what was going on or what choice we were talking about. The system offered an option for gifting a flask of a rejuvenating elixir called India God Oil. The young man realized that for the most part, it was a necessary thing for the old man. The second option was 800-year-old ginseng root. Fang noticed the rather strange shape of the root. However, it was necessary to decide in the shortest possible time. The main character still chose the ginseng root. Suddenly his gift shook. Li carefully peered into the box and discovered a very different root. The guy rejoiced, realizing that all the guests would appreciate his gift. The arrogant and extremely cocky Xuan was in anticipation of embarrassing the hapless son-in-law. But the young man decided to bet with Shuo, whose gift will be worse. The one leaves the banquet. Liu naturally agreed. After which, Fan hurriedly gave his grandfather an 800-year-old ginseng root as a gift, wishing him to live as many years. The guests began to compare roots and identified the winning option, precisely Li, saying that Xuan's root is rather unsightly compared to the beggar son-in-law's gift. Shuo in turn began to say that this ginseng looked strange. The young man smiled, asking the old man who he thought was a more worthy groom for Shui. Afterward, the smug guy turned to Liu and declared that he had lost. The angered Xuan couldn't find a place to be and muttered in a frenzy that he would definitely meet with him. Shuo was filled with anger and wanted to take revenge on Li as soon as possible. At this moment, the enthusiastic grandfather praised Fanya, asking him to hurry up and take his seat at the ceremony. The son-in-law looked after the old man and saw that a certain thing had fallen out of his pocket. The protagonist decided to pick up an unknown object to return to an old man. The guy began to scrutinize the gold pocket watch, noticing that inside the watch was a picture of what looked like a girl, and the system detected the host's rapid heartbeat, realizing that he liked this type of girl. Fan assumed that the woman in the picture was the old man's late wife. At this moment, he was called out by Shuei. Smiling, Li turned around. Inquired where he got the 800-year-old ginseng root. The boy replied that it was a family jewel, inherited from his grandfather. The girl said that it was better for him not to use his dirty methods, so that there would be no problems later, especially under the name of the An family. The young man, for his part, was extremely indignant at such an accusation. The young son-in-law nervously declared that he wasn't in the business of fraud or anything like that. Zhu said that usually poor people don't care about pride, and she has no interest in him. The protagonist mouthed that rich people love, counting money to give marks to the rest of us, wondering how much he needed to earn to be worthy of her, how much money she needs to be satisfied. 10 million. The young son-in-law continued to unnerve An by suggesting that 100 million should be enough for her. The damsel at a certain point couldn't stand it and slapped him. The guy was dumbfounded by the reaction and behavior spoiled Shuei. An muttered that she didn't need money. It was enough not to lie and not to pretend to be a beggar who could buy such an expensive root. After that, the guests hurriedly sat down at the festive table. Fong realized that she didn't believe his ginseng story. Li looked at her and admired her beautiful facial features. At this time, Grandpa's assistant brought some documents. The old man said he wanted to clarify a point. The assistant mouthed that all the necessary paperwork had already been collected. As it turned out, they were documents about who would inherit a share of his inheritance, where 20% of the company's stock would go to educate the new family member. Everyone present was shocked. It was as if the old man was deliberately stalling to say who exactly had been so honored. After a brief pause, the grandfather stated that 20% of the shares belonged to his granddaughter's husband. The protagonist, in turn, was shocked by such news. Naturally, the whole family was against such a decision, saying that the poor man had his eye on their inheritance. After offering to give this money to Zhua, the old man began to boil with anger. Then he accused his family of just waiting for him to die so they could take everything for themselves. Grandpa extremely persuasively asked Fanya to sign the contract. The system threatened Li not to sign the contract. The young man was at a loss, not knowing the right thing to do. The expression on An's face said that he shouldn't put his signature. The boy realized that by agreeing, he would become rich, forgetting about poverty as a terrible dream, and all those ungrateful and greedy people will no longer despise him. Money is of course a good and necessary thing as a means of survival. However, Zhu's conscience and words prevented the protagonist from signing the contract. As a result, Fan tore up the contract, realizing that it really didn't match that kind of money. All present were shocked and more worried about the stock. Li confidently declared that he was refusing his grandfather's offer, adding that he doesn't want to carry that burden for the rest of his life, and in the near future he will make a lot of money himself equal to the rich. Anne in turn was surprised, because she thought the guy only wanted their money. For a while there was a sepulchral silence in the banquet hall. The old man suddenly declared that he had always dreamed of having such a friend. The protagonist enthusiastically reciprocated his grandfather's response. Subsequently, they started acting like best friends. This behavior didn't please the perpetually disgruntled Shuei, who asked Fang to stop it. Li began to convince her otherwise, while bantering with her in parallel. The girl in turn was enraged and hit him, after which they went outside. The young wife demanded that he get in the car immediately, as he had already had quite a bit to drink. The young man refused, saying he wished he had a little more to drink. An started pulling at his clothes. Suddenly, the guy tripped over her foot. This caused the newlyweds to fall onto the car, literally leaning against the glass. Thus, they grasping each other made eye contact. Zhu asked him to step back and not to breathe his booze on her. The protagonist, blurring into a smile, gently put his arm around her shoulders. After saying that, she looked down at him all the time, but today her gaze changed. The girl couldn't stop being angry. Fang had noticed that she was very beautiful when she was angry. Subsequently, An slapped again her newfound hubby. Li felt abruptly dizzy and decided to crouch down on the ground. A moment later, the young man heard a familiar voice, a maiden asking him why he was sitting here. While calling her husband, the protagonist looked up and saw a similar girl to Shuei. She asked to go home. The guy asked who she was. The girl replied that he must have had a lot to drink since he didn't recognize his wife. Fang felt a kind of weakness and gradually closed his eyes, falling into a deep sleep. The next morning, Li was awakened by a sudden phone call. As it turned out, An called him and asked where he was. The young man replied that he was at home. Zhui started yelling that she would file for divorce because he was constantly lying to her. The protagonist didn't understand what she was talking about, so he interrogated her. The young wife stated that there was irrefutable evidence on the internet. At that moment in his bed, an unknown damsel asked who he was talking to. Fan was dumbfounded and abruptly jumped up from the bed. The young lady introduced herself as his wife, Chong Li. Li recognized her as an internet star advertising various products. In response, the stranger just smiled. The guy didn't understand what was going on. Chong got out of bed and headed towards him, saying that he finally remembered her, after which she showed a video on her phone of them having a good time. The girl stated that they had been together for a long time and everything was great. The main character snatched the phone out of his hands and asked when this video was recorded. Realizing that this was actually what Shui was actually talking about, Shui told him. At that moment, An entered their apartment and saw a disappointing picture. Fan inquired how wifey had found them. Chan said she had sent her the address. Sad Shui was mortified to realize that Li appeared to be in a relationship with someone else. The young man tried to make excuses, saying that this was the first time he was seeing this maiden, but winded on, mouthed that they were getting a divorce and would go to her grandfather to explain everything. The protagonist was well aware that he was framed, but who did it was not clear. Chan in turn only smirked caustically, looking into the guy's eyes. Sad Fan locked himself in the bathroom, Zhui hustling him in every way possible. Li replied that he had to take a bath before meeting his grandfather. An exasperated An stated that he had 15 minutes. While Zhang was counting her lost subscribers as a result of this announcement, Zhu resented it, trying to figure out how she was worse than her and how it even happened. Meanwhile, the protagonist was racking his brain, realizing that he now had to explain everything to the old man. A dejected Fan wanted to understand how such a thing could happen. Li decided to look at the current situation in the stock market and found that the stock literally collapsed, which means it's someone else's cunning plan. The only one who could do that was the villain Xuan, because it was profitable for him, because in this way he will get rid of the competitor. The system offered to help, but the guy declined, saying he understood it himself. By doing so, I offended the program that provided the right to choose. The first option is Wu Zetian, putting himself above everyone else and not worrying about anything. The second option is Shangguan Wanner. The chief counselor holds all the power in his hands. The protagonist didn't understand what was going on, so he asked the system. The program responded, if the host is found to be mentally retarded, an arbitrary choice is made. Fan realized that the first option was beneficial to the system, while the second suited him. Since Li didn't want him to have another powerful woman, he subsequently chose the second option. Meanwhile, in the An family, the daughter alerted her father that her son-in-law had done a terrible thing to their little girl. After all, he had a mistress, which caused the stock to plummet, demanding an immediate divorce as such a scoundrel had no right to be her daughter's husband. At this moment, the door to the old man's study opened. Zhui announced that they had arrived. Moments later, they went inside with Chan. Grandpa was furious, wondering if Fang had cheated on them and had a woman on the side. At this time, the system showed the main character, a picture. Realizing that no one but him can see the window of information, the program showed the very same photo from the old man's pocket watch, and the guy understood. Grandpa continues to love his wife. At the same time, he is lovelorn. The most important thing is that the feelings remain for one person. Consequently, the young man decided to confess that he was indeed looking for a mistress. But at the same time, his heart belongs to Shui. Besides, he hasn't spent a penny of their money. Anne's mother claimed he dared to cheat on her daughter. Fan replied that they had been doing everything they could for months to make him dispel his feelings for her, adding that no man would enjoy sleeping in the living room and listening to derogatory remarks to himself. This happened because of their pride and assertiveness, so Li couldn't stand it and went to seek solace in another woman. However, he still loves Zhui. Everyone was shocked by this statement from his son-in-law. Suddenly, the old man laughed, saying that it was normal for a man to have many girls. The main thing was to love one. The protagonist mentally celebrated his victory after realizing that he had succeeded. Grandfather mouthed that it was not worth it to bring it to divorce. The mother disagreed. Also, the old man mentioned the large losses. Fan confidently stated that he would make up for all the losses soon. Otherwise, he will cease to be a husband to his granddaughter. After a while, Li opened his own establishment where he poured milk tea. Zhang in turn hurriedly went live, saying to subscribers that she's back with them and missed the streamers. In the chat room, literally every second wrote different comments. But they were all connected, just to one person, and she wasn't all that interesting to them anymore. Viewers were more concerned about the fate of their relationship, with some admiring Fan while others were the opposite. Li, who suddenly appeared, greeted the subscribers by promising them a 20% discount. A disgruntled Zhang stated that the live broadcast time was not meant to promote his milk tea. The protagonist pointed to the pandemonium, wanting to try his tea, and smiled. Afterward, the guy approached her and languidly said that he happened to notice her start streaming. The young man urged Chong Li to showcase their special friendship on camera, then reached over and kissed the girl on the cheek. The raucous comments immediately pouring into the chat room. Fans said that her live shows help his business. The girl was furious. In fact, Zhang dreamed of becoming the mistress of the Liu family. The young maiden literally hated Li for his antics. After a while, the evening came. The guy hurriedly closed the store. Wang remarked that they had made good money today. In addition, they had an offer to open a couple more shops. At this rate, they would soon recoup the N family's losses. The protagonist replied that they needed to reimburse the sum, 10 million. The system swept up that she was only responsible for the flavor of the milk tea, and the price was set by Fan. Li realized that he needed to sell tea to pay his grandfather until his old age. Suddenly, the young man remembered Ye Chong Li and wondered where she was. Van replied that she was out to talk, on the phone, adding that An wanted to walk her home, but the girl refused. The guy thought it was strange. Meanwhile, Chong complained to Xuan that Fan took advantage of her popularity and promoted his store. Shuo asked if Li had agreed to a few people joining his network. The girl replied that he had ignored them. Liu realized that his plan wasn't working, which meant it was worth resorting to extreme measures. After all, he wanted to ruin the protagonist's business, and now the old man will become even more proud of him. Xuan put his arm around Chong and smilingly mouthed that he would need her help. Shuo abruptly grabbed the girl's hand. She didn't realize what was happening. Liu pronounced to make Fan defeated, he would have to sacrifice her. Around the corner of the building were Xuan's cunning accomplices, who in turn started filming Zhang and pulling her arms. The girl called out for help, not realizing what Shuo was up to. The bandits said she had borrowed a lot of money, and it was time to pay back what she owed. Showing her the promissory note where everything was laid out, Chan denied everything. The guy showed the paper, her signature, saying she owed money. The damsel could not understand, for Liu had said that this money was needed for the avoidance of doubt, and so she signed the document, and now it had turned into a loan. But most importantly, Xuan was willing to sacrifice her. The gangbangers had made the point that she should blame it all on Li, who didn't turn out to have any money. At that moment, the main character suddenly appeared. He demanded that they let her go. Then he struck one of the big guys hard, stating that they are excessively petty, for they made a circus out of money. Feng then threw them his bank card and a recipe for milk tea, encouraging them to take the card and prescription and get out immediately. Half an hour before the incident, the system hinted to the host about the problem, asking him to pay attention to an important thing. Li didn't understand what was going on. The program asked to find Chan, but the guy refused, replying that he was too busy. The system reiterated the demand, prompting that for the consequences he would be personally responsible. The program bored for a while. Eventually, the young man agreed. Walking down Fan Street, asked why he should look for Chan. The system replied that it was her mandate to warn, not explain, adding that he only had 10 minutes to find her or else the irreparable would happen. Li had previously installed in her phone a wiretap and beacon, so it will not be difficult to find the girl. Realizing that Liu must have called Chong for further instructions, as his business is going strong. After a short period of time, the protagonist found the location, the girl. As he approached the designated place, Fan saw Xuan, who in turn was calmly smoking a cigarette without paying attention to him. Li instantly ran up to Shuo and grabbed him and demanded that he explain what he needed from Chan and where she was. Liu said it was in the alley around the corner of the house, adding that the girl is with loan sharks and if the guy pays them, they'll let her go. Also, if he is short of money, he can give away the tea recipe and patent rights. The exasperated young man stated that he understood Xuan's demands. The next day, news broke that the An family's son-in-law had tyrannized the star by his actions and the police launched an investigation. At this time, his daughter ran into Grandpa An's office and told him the bad news, demanding again an immediate divorce before this guy completely tarnishes their family's reputation. The old man understood the seriousness of the incident. Meanwhile, correspondents pestered Fan with questions as to why he was released from the police station so quickly. Li responded that he was called in to get the details of that video, and he had not committed any crime. But irrepressible journalists said that he was nicknamed the Chief Dog because he cheated on his wife and deceived his mistress. In response, the guy said he should be called the most charming man, because if he wasn't the best, Zhua wouldn't have agreed to be his wife. Chan would also have no interest in him, adding that being bad is not contraindicated. Correspondents were shocked by this statement of the young man, not understanding how women liked him. The main character continued to be defiant, saying he might even go on live TV and tell everything. The old man's daughter instantly rushed to her father, informing him that his son-in-law, having gotten into trouble, was not trying to make things right. On the contrary, it makes the situation worse, but Grandpa didn't think it was bad news, since the company's stock is up again, which means everything is fine. Meanwhile, the staff alerted Liu about the stock increase and that fans started streaming to a huge audience. Xuan literally became furious at this news. Li became an internet star in just one night, under the pseudonym Superdog. As such, there are more people interested, which plays into the old man's hands, while Shuo's platform may not be able to withstand the competition, and the stock may fall in value. The staff showed a video of Liu where the main character talks about how Chan, a charming young man, fell in love with him, adding that he poached fans of Xuan's platform, which is unable to satisfy his subscribers. An exasperated Shuo couldn't find a place to be, having swept up the fact that he had a secret recipe, milk tea, but the aide said the restaurant business will not make up for the loss because the cost of tea is too high. Whereupon Liu couldn't take it anymore and finally freaked out. He threw the phone away and started swearing uncontrollably, ordering a subordinate to call Chen, who has long wanted to take revenge on his grandfather, at the same time and set a trap in the country house. Meanwhile, Fang arrived home. The assistant remarked that he had done a good job today. The girl hastened to give him a share of the stream in the amount of 500,000. Li got out of the car. The assistant announced that next time they would be selling toys. The tired guy replied that he remembered that and headed home. The girl noted his decency, which was different from who he portrayed on the streamers. Upon entering the house, the young man ran into Shui, who called out to him. Anne muttered that he's been too active lately. Li replied, "It's to make amends to the company," adding that the corporation's stock has risen significantly, which means they need not divorce. The girl looked at him suspiciously. The protagonist didn't realize what was wrong. She remembered her grandfather's admonition that this guy wasn't as bad as he might seem. His wife said his grandfather called him an emperor capable of continuing the company's business, adding that she thought the old man had overestimated his worth. Fang swept his grandfather with respect, but that was another matter. Since Shui evaluates him objectively, he really has no money, no merit, and natural qualities are also lame. The only thing he can boast of is a beautiful wife, and he realizes that he is more like the emperor's son-in-law, and was surprised. After talking to his wife, Li went to the old man's office. Grandfather asked if Zhu had left. The young man replied that she had just gone out. He reported that Liu had called him to discuss the sale of a piece of land and invited him to his country home. However, the reason may lie elsewhere. The protagonist stated that we'll go with him to make Shuo regret what he did. Besides, he will help in negotiating a piece of land. The old man praised the brave son-in-law. At this point, the system notified the host of the promotion. Fang in turn couldn't understand what was going on. The program spelled out that the gentleman had made his choice and approved the look of the escort. A moment later, a young girl suddenly appeared in front of Li. The first thing that caught the eye was that the damsel was dressed in a maid's outfit. She was a pretty enough girl, not like the others. The system stated that having analyzed all the data, this girl is his ideal type. The beauty had a completely different image compared to Shui. Fang realized that it was actually the program that had transformed into a young person. Li inquired why she did it. The system asked for a name. After a bit of thought, the young man named her Xuan, for she was always putting him to the choice. The main character asked her if the other people could see her. The program replied that no one else could see her but him, adding that at the moment Zhang is out of town and this could affect his fate. The young man swept up. They haven't contacted each other again since that incident. He assumed that Yi was playing an important role in his life. After a while, Shuo was alerted to the arrival of guests at the country cottage. The smiling Liu was extremely polite and asked to go inside. The old man asked why he abruptly changed his decision. Xuan replied, his stock dropped in value because of Fan and no one wants to cooperate. For what reason he made such a decision? But the fault of the grandfather in this is not. Anne muttered that it's not about him, but about the fierce competition in the stock market, because they work according to their principles. Inside himself, Liu was literally mad and wanted to lash out at the old man. But outwardly he didn't give any sign. On the contrary, he agreed with his grandfather, adding that in that case, they need to compete for a place under the palm trees. Turning around, Shuo asked Chen, who in turn agreed. Gu Shan greeted his grandfather on high with a smile on his face. Old man Feng was shocked by Chen's sudden appearance. The protagonist noticed that Hai had a change in his face, assuming that this Shan is not a simple person. A few minutes later, Gu and An were already playing poker. Where the bet were all the stocks of their companies, there was one last round left. Grandpa Fen agreed to play big all the way to the end. Fang suspected something wrong, for before they had a chance to talk, they started gambling, putting everything on the line. Seeing the perplexed expression on Fan's face, Xuan hurriedly told him the story. about why the An family in this city for decades has retained supremacy. A few years ago, the An and Chen families sought to monopolize the economic arteries of the entire city, but the winner could not be found. Then the heads of families decided to play a big game, where the loser gives everything and leaves the city. In that game, Feng Hai cheated Gu to win. An made a condition: if Shan was back on his feet, they would play again. Li had no idea that an old man in his youth had committed such a shameful deed. After a couple minutes, Chen shouted enthusiastically that he had won, demanding that Hai leave town. Fen replied that he was cheating and Lu helped him. The protagonist realized that they really did set it all up. The gloating Shuo had taken stock of the fact that now Fang was left without his patron. Shan threw the cards on the table and said that last time the old man had also cheated to win, so they were even. An was depressed, realizing that this was the end, but Li determined to help his grandfather. The guy, in turn, was unwilling to accept reality. In this regard, confidently mouthed that the round is not yet over. The arrogant Go replied that they no longer had the funds and no one would replay it. The young man took out a card, saying that it had 2 million on it, and he would invest in Mr. An's company and personally play with Chen. Shan agreed, at which point the system called out to the host, offered a choice of 2 options for future events. The first, win the game; the second, drink Coca-Cola. The choice was more than obvious. Xuan asked the master to make up his mind. Shuo told Cheng that he had ordered the table to be set and was waiting for him. Gu promised to deal quickly with the youngster. Lu added that he would wait upstairs since he wanted to rest. The protagonist assumed Chan was upstairs, which is where Xuan headed. In this regard, it is necessary to beat Shan as soon as possible and help Ye. Fang naturally chose the first option and set to work. Li stated that if he won, Chen would apologize to Hai on his knees. Naive Gu agreed. The guy smiled and urged him to start the game. Shan, for his part, had a pretty good spread of cards. After all, he's been honing his poker skills all this time. Besides, there were cameras dotted around with the help of which Chen knew what the young man had on his hands, as it was with the old man where Gao reported cards and combinations. Arrogant Shan was confident of his victory, wondering in what way the kid intends to beat him. Chen urged him, looking at his card layout. Fang asked Gu, taking his time to lose. Since he still has a lot of chips and it will take him no small amount of time to get all the money back, Fena. Shan realized the guy was underestimating him by asking what he was talking about. Li decided to put it on the line, 2 million and his life, to finish the game in 1 game. Fang encouraged Chen in every way possible, urging him to take the risk. Old man Hai tried to change the mind of his so confident son-in-law, but the boy assured him that he would definitely win. Gu laughed in response, calling the young man crazy, then agreed. Naturally, Shan was absolutely certain of victory, especially when Chen dealt the cards. He fudged them, getting 3 aces and a pair of kings, while Li had 2 threes. Blurring into a smile, Gu declared that the boy couldn't win. Because he has 3 aces and 2 kings, Shan put the cards on the table, adding that Fan had 2 threes and inevitably lost. However, the protagonist stated that he did not have 2 Cs, and as many as 4 threes. Li confidently showed his cards. The shocked Chen was sweating because the probability of such a card layout was incredibly small. Gu, in turn, began furiously accusing the young man of cheating. Old An, the old man's son-in-law, replied that he was just lucky. Feng demanded that Shan kneel down immediately and apologize to Feng. An exasperated Chen admitted defeat, agreeing to fulfill the demand. However, Grandpa Hai asked not to do so, in return for extinguishing the conflict between their families, saying he doesn't need Gao's money and they are, for now even. Shan stated that he did not wish to remain in debt, and so he was giving the plot of land to Lu, the old man, and the lost money will give to his son-in-law. But Fan also refused, demanding forget about revenge. At this time, the Xuan system reminded Li that it was necessary to rescue Chong. The protagonist hurriedly left Hai and Chen, saying that he had urgent business to attend to. The guy at the same hour went to the top, where Ye asked Shuo to let her go. Liu stated that she had, after all, always liked him, and didn't understand why she was acting like this. The girl replied that she was not ready for a relationship. Xuan urged Chong, be an obedient girl and then everything will be fine. But the girl in turn stonewalled. Shuo asked if she didn't like him anymore. At that moment, Feng ran into the room like a wild man. As a result, Li immediately swooped down on Lu, throwing a punch. A dumbfounded Xuan asked what he was doing here. Upon discovering that the guy knocked out his tooth, Shuo freaked out. Subsequently, he shouted loudly, calling out to the guards. Liu ordered them to grab the young man and take him to the basement, the protagonist claiming that he was saving his girlfriend. Xuan replied that the An family had come to an end and Shui would become his wife. Feng wondered why torture Chan if he liked his spouse. Shuo muttered that he could afford a whole harem, unlike him, adding that there was nothing wrong with being lovable, but only Shui, worthy to be with him. At this time, an old man entered the room, remarking that a woman is not a toy, and Liu is not worthy of his granddaughter, so he should forget about her. Xuan pointed out that An family, bankrupt and marry him, his granddaughter, the only chance of financial security. Chan, who entered the room, declared that the old man had not lost, and he did not need his piece of land. And at the moment, only the An family is able to buy the land. Fan complimented that in the last round, it was he who won. Shuo couldn't believe it. The guard asked if the guy should be taken to the basement. Liu was silent, since in his mind there was only one question: how Li was able to win. And Gu suddenly changed his mind. Xuan was shocked by what was happening. Liu suddenly started saying that he loves Shui, and he doesn't need this girl. The protagonist swept up in how cleverly Shuo had changed his shoes after discovering that Yi was not in the room. The system also alerted the host about the escaped Chan. Xuan's program told the Lord that he should look for her outside. Fan instantly ran outside, where he saw a crying Ye. Li noted that Liu was not worthy of her tears. The girl said that for a long time it was Shuo who helped her and she loved him. Juan asked her to make her and Shui divorce by promising to marry her. Chan burst into tears even more, asking Li if she wasn't worthy of being loved. The guy tried to calm her down by stating that it wasn't about her at all, adding that Liu just doesn't know about girls, because no man can resist a beauty like her, and all she needs to do is without question believe in herself. He even smiled, saying he had a knack for calming down girls. At that moment, a black car headed in the direction of the young men. The guy said he didn't really know how to calm the upset girl down. Chan suddenly shouted that there was a car ahead and pushed the young man away. Thus endangering herself, the car was coming straight at her. The main character was shocked at what was happening and shouted her name. As a result, the car struck the girl with lightning speed. Moments later, Chan found herself on the pavement unconscious. In the first few minutes, Fan was confused and didn't know what to do. Guy couldn't understand why she suddenly decided to sacrifice herself. Li was gripped by panic, his thoughts confused, and with trembling hands, the young man reached for E. The protagonist tried to call the system, but at the most crucial moment, it did not respond. At this time, a drunken girl got out of the car, asking if they would claim compensation, adding that she won't get poorer by losing a couple million. An enraged fan stated that drunk driving is extremely dangerous. The drunken maiden began to scrutinize the young man's face, noting that she had seen him somewhere. Then it dawned on her that he was that Li Fong from the internet, and the girl she ran over, the stellar Chan Li, and she'd read about them in the weekly. Saying that they fit together, the protagonist boiled with anger. Seeing the condition of the guy, the drunken person wondered if he would dare to hit her. The young man took Chan in his arms and hurriedly borrowed a car from the insolent drunkard. In response, the girl said she would go to the police and report the car stolen. Fan urged her not to hesitate, and at the same time tell them how she had hit a man while intoxicated, whereupon a nervous Li got into an auto and instantly went to the nearest hospital. The unstable damsel shouted after the protagonist that she would get him. The guy was concerned about the condition of the injured Chan, and as such drove faster. The young man couldn't understand why the Xuan system wasn't responding. After a few seconds, the program did show up, asking him to fasten his seatbelt and not be nervous. The system picked up on the fact that he had completely forgotten about how he had failed the exam, and at this point he's breaking the law because he's driving without a driver's license. But the most important thing is to save Chan. After a while, Li walked into the emergency room asking about Ye's condition. The doctor reassured the young man, saying that if he had brought her a little later, it would have been impossible to save the girl, and now everything is fine. Fang heaved a sigh of relief after asking Xuan where she disappeared to at that moment. The program began to explain that Yi was a turning point in his life. Subsequently, Chong was abandoned by the villainous Xuan Shuo. Due to the fact that she would soon commit suicide, Liu would hold him responsible for her death. And old man An, he would lose all his capital and Li lose his footing and go to jail, adding that at certain times in life, the host himself has to make the decision, and in some cases the system will help. Now that Fang has completed the first trial, his life will begin to evolve for the better. Meanwhile, Li had another problem. Suddenly, Shui arrived at the hospital. The guy was surprised by her appearance. Along with her was a police officer who approached the protagonist, saying he's accused of stealing a car and suspected of killing a cleaning lady. After a certain amount of time, the guy ended up at the police station, in an interrogation room. Fan decided to get a gift box from the system before the investigator arrived. The program stated that it is a miniature camera that has ultra-high resolution. The young man was puzzled, not understanding why Xuan was always giving him all sorts of junk. The system reported that this camera can be used to secretly film Chan. The shocked protagonist began to imagine how the device could be used, from what came to even greater perplexity, and turned to the program with a question: why Xuan offers him such shameful things, and refused the given venture. The system clarified that the coordinates of the cameras use its Ward E. At that moment, Fang heard the doorknob being turned. Li in turn realized that an investigator had come to him with interrogations. Along with the policeman, the same girl who hit Chan with her car walked in. The investigator asked if he stole her car. Joe Susu began to pretend to be a victim and fake crying, confirming the police officer's assumptions, adding that he was the one who hit that poor girl with her car. Angry young man began to accuse the cunning Chengdu of lying, stating that she was the one who hit Zhang and he stole the car to take the girl to the hospital, asking to ask E. Joe literally did a one-actor theater, smiling at Fan. The investigator mumbled that they would get to the truth, but he ran over the janitor to death. The girl started playing along again, saying he was a murderer. The police officer went on to charge Li with unlawful driving and fleeing the scene. The protagonist was outraged, reporting that there had been no accidents on the way to the hospital and he had not hit anyone. At this time, a junior police officer opened the door and, after apologizing to the young man, stated that he was free to go. The investigator was outraged, saying he was the prime suspect. It turned out he was bailed out, and they didn't have much in the way of evidence. Fang assumed it was Old Man An, determined to help him. Flushed with happiness, Li walked out of the police station, where Brother Van was waiting for him with open arms. The guy urged the protagonist to come home as soon as possible because he bailed him out. The frustrated young man wondered if the brother had come alone. Wang An replied that as soon as he heard what had happened, he immediately ran over and did not see anyone, adding that he was sure of his innocence and the police would soon prove it. Meanwhile, Xue met with the head of the Zhou family, who said that the most important thing was to keep Chengdu out of it, and proposed an order for 2 billion. Anne wondered if it was true that Fan had run over that man to death. The man replied positively, remarking that his daughter was leaving the country soon and it would be better for Li to come clean. The girl realized that they had deliberately shifted the blame to her husband so that Susu would go abroad in peace. This contract, however, will be able to revitalize the grandfather company. Zhu, in turn, didn't know what she should do. The right thing to do. At that moment, Fan showed up on the doorstep, noting that he had increased in value for 2 billion to throw him in jail. Not a bad deal. Anne was surprised at her husband's sudden appearance and asked him how he came back so quickly. Li replied that her family had been slow to get him off the police force, intending thus to get rid of him. The girl began to make excuses, stating that he had gotten it all wrong. The protagonist looked at his wife with a cold and soulless gaze. Joe muttered that he was just about to have a conversation with him about the fact that Susu, only 21 years old, and she should not lose her future because of other people's mistakes. The guy responded that she was intoxicated, hit a man, and was playing the victim. The man stated he had no evidence while he was seen at the scene, offering the young man 10 million for his heartfelt confession. Also, he will pay a round sum of money to the An family's company and take on additional expenses. Fans swept up that the father is no different from the daughter. Moreover, it is clear in whom Chengda, such a grown-up. Li refused to accept Zhou's terms, saying he wouldn't go for it. He added that his daughter would be behind bars for a long time, and no amount of money would save her, after which the protagonist turned to Xue and uttered that he was extremely disappointed in her, and since she has always dreamed of divorce, he agrees to do it. The girl was shocked. Head Zhou recommended to Fan, "Don't turn down such an opportunity. Otherwise, he'll find evidence and make him look like a murderer, and then he won't escape accountability." Li grabbed his finger, which he waved at the young man's face, and began to twist it, stating that it is against the law to buy or distort evidence and he should know about it. Twisting his finger even harder, the guy added that one day he would go to jail. Zhou, in turn, literally sobbed, saying that he was in pain. Then the upset protagonist headed for the exit. Zhui called him crazy. After all, there's no evidence that would clear him of the charges, and he is making the situation worse. In fact, Anne also wanted to drive Zhou into prison. Fan asked her earnestly, minding her manners, because from now on she's a total stranger to him, and if she dared to speak to him in that tone, she would receive similar treatment in her direction. The guy then hurriedly left the room, slamming the door loudly behind him. She was shocked by Li's behavior and remarks. Zhou in turn hated him, wanting to eliminate the young man as soon as possible. The girl for a long time could not believe that he asked for a divorce. Stepping outside, the protagonist felt a kind of lightness. However, it was too early to relax, as it is necessary to find irrefutable evidence of his innocence. If he does, he could actually face jail time. A moment later, Xuan suddenly appeared. The system reported that the camera had sent a certain video, asking if the host wanted to keep it. After seeing Chenda walk into Zhang's room at the beginning of the video, Fan naturally asked the program immediately save the source material, assuming that she must have come for the purpose of bribing E, and if Chan betrays him, the situation will become much more complicated. He asked who she was. Susu stated that she hit her with a car, and since the girl was unconscious, she could not see her face. Joe assumed that she knew her because beautiful girls, not many. Sitting down on her bunk, the crafty lady declared that today was not her day, for she had drunk wine and hit 2 people. But the second one was less fortunate, as he died on the spot, and if it wasn't for Fan, it would have been the end of her as well. Chan began to realize what she was up to as she held the bank card in her hand. Susu reported, "This card has 5 million in E. It should be said that Lee hit a man with a car," adding that her father bribed the other witnesses and it's just a matter of time. After all, her false testimony will prove the protagonist's guilt. Chan realized that Joe wanted her to set the guy up. The businesswoman remarked that this kind of money she hadn't seen, not even with Shuo. In response, Ye threw the card at Chengdae's insolent face, denying her this offer. The distraught lady muttered that she had no right to behave like that, and her father still won't let her go to jail without perjury. Chan stated that she would now contact the police and let them know about the bribe. Susu smiled, noting that she had no proof. At this moment, Fan suddenly entered the room and turned on the recording, on which you can clearly hear the glamorous lady trying to bribe Zhang. A shocked Joe said she asked about it and there were no cameras in the wards. The young man urged her to confess everything to the police before it was too late, and maybe she would get some leniency. But the girl resorted to other methods to make a deal. Chenda literally sticks to the protagonist trying to seduce him, after which she ranted that she'd actually always dreamed of him, and if Fan deleted the tape, they'd blame it on Zhang. He in turn was perplexed, wanting to finish off the business rat. Joe didn't give up hope to influence the guy's decision with her charms. It didn't take long for Lee to react, and he threw her out of the room, where the cunning maiden was waiting for a police officer, who hurriedly showed his ID, asking Souza to come with him to the police station, as she had run over a man to death and fled the scene of the crime. Already crying, Joe demanded that her father be summoned. After a while, a concerned father was calling around looking for the best lawyer for his daughter. The man was furious at what had happened and couldn't find a place to go. The head of Joe intended to take revenge on the cunning Fang. On the internet, news spread about Chengdae, who was imprisoned for 21 years. Meanwhile, the protagonist picked up the weak Chan from the hospital and carried her on his back. He hurriedly informed the boy of Susu's sentence, prompting her to say that she had paid in full. But her father is unlikely to leave Anne's family alone, as Fang has caused them a lot of problems. Lee said sadly that he had nothing more to do with this family. A surprised Chang wondered if he really intended to divorce Shui. The lad replied that she thought him a fool, and yet he had treated them with all his soul and kindness, adding that no matter how beautiful An is, she is not worthy of his selfless love. He was genuinely happy about this decision of the young man. Starting to twitch, the protagonist urged her, calm down. Fang asked Chan if she was so excited because she wanted to be his wife, yet in turn began to deny Lee's assumptions, talking about how he hasn't even gotten a divorce and about that it's too early to tell. At that moment, an ambulance suddenly stopped next to them, into which, on a stretcher, the medical staff hurriedly carried the old man, Haya. A crying Shui with her brothers followed her grandfather. The guy was shocked to see this picture. As a result, immediately brought Chan down to earth, saying he had urgent business and she needed to get home. The girl was naturally displeased by the young man's abrupt behavior. Fang kissed her forehead gently, asking her to wait for him at home. An indignant Yi hastened to inform him that she had no need to wait for him. The protagonist rushed to the hospital, intending to find out what happened to the old man. Meanwhile, Fen's grandfather was put in the first-class service area. After hooking him up to life support, the whole family was in. The mercurial Shui brothers began to question Hai whether he had left a will, trying to find out who will be the next head of his company. An angered An demanded them not to bother the old man, saying they only had money on their minds. In response, the brothers blamed her husband for what happened, because Fang crossed the Zhou family and their company lost a lot of orders, which led to Grandpa's stroke, and they, long ago, forced Lee to terminate the stock transfer agreement. Zhue replied that she, unlike them, was thinking about the old man's condition, adding that Hai was right to ask her husband to run the corporation since they are self-serving people. All this time, the young man stood outside the door and heard the quarrel, realizing that before he would not have allowed his wife to talk to him like that. At this moment, the system suddenly showed up, asking the master to help Zhue. The protagonist was puzzled and interrogated the program. After all, she almost put him in jail, and now she needs help. Xuan stated that this is the best option calculated by the system, especially he himself wants to help her otherwise. Why did Fan come to the hospital? Lee mumbled that he had come to visit his grandfather, as he had been kind to him. However, if the program gives him the opportunity to cure the old man, he will help, stating that he has money and there are plenty of decent girls in the world. After that, the guy went down the hallway to the street and accidentally bumped into the girl. Like a true gentleman, the protagonist apologized. The maiden in turn insulted him by saying he should watch where he was going. Fang looked languidly after the fleeing young lady. The system picked up on the fact that he hasn't gotten divorced yet, and he's already looking at other people. But Lee seemed familiar with this girl, thinking he had met her somewhere. After running a few meters, it dawned on the hurried lady that it was Jua's husband. The girl immediately turned around and rushed outside, aiming to catch up with him. However, the young man was nowhere to be found. The nervous damsel returned to the hospital, realizing that she had missed the villain, but her thirst for revenge never left her. After a certain time, she and her mother and sister went home. Yue began to say that she would definitely find him, because he had made their grandfather sick. The mother stated that since he came into their home, everything had gone downhill. Also, he destroyed 20% of the stock given to him by Hai. Zhu asked her mom, "Let's talk about bad things, especially since her sister had just returned." But the woman was wound up, saying that a true daughter should be at one with her mother, and turned to Yue, taking her hands, adding that their family is looking for dirt on Fan so that he doesn't get his father's inheritance. The obedient daughter assured her mother that she would do her best and would not let them get hurt. Zhu thought about how her sister had just arrived, how she was already causing trouble. The girl called out to Fan, asking him to give her a pill for her head. Oblivious to the fact that the young man was no longer in her house, she had gotten used to the caring guy. An felt sad. Yue in turn noticed her sister, upset, wanting revenge on Lee, for his sister and the family he brought so much misfortune to. Meanwhile, the main character came home to Ye Chong's house, noting rather huge and spacious her house, adding that there's enough room in it for a couple of kids. The girl got out of bed, replying that he wasn't talking about that. However, she still had difficulty getting around on her own, and as a result, mouthed that she needed care. Also, she intends to make off with the stock, the young guy. That's why she agreed to shelter her runaway son-in-law, Fang stated jokingly, wondering why she suddenly blushed. Suddenly, Lee took her hand, telling her that if she liked him, they could get married after the divorce. In response, Zhang asked when she said she sympathized with him. The young man blurred into a smile, saying that he was a normal guy, and realizes when a girl likes him, at which point his phone rang. The protagonist hurriedly answered the call from an unknown number. Yue asked to meet her as she needed his help with what was going on in the family. Chong got nervous, jealous of him, and asked who An Yue was. Fang replied that she was Yue's sister who was away studying in America, adding that he needed to get away for a while because their family was in chaos. Lee stated that it was his duty to help the old man, especially at a time like this, after which he called a cab and came to the specified place, where Yue was waiting for him in the middle of the night, in the middle of the woods, alone. The guy swept up that she was the one he'd met today, at the hospital, adding that she's much prettier than she looks in photos. The young man wondered why the girl had called him to such a deserted place. Also, the protagonist was interested in the condition of Hai's grandfather. Yue replied that the old man was fine, unlike him. At that time, behind her back, men with clubs came out of the forest thicket. A dumbfounded Fang realized that he had fallen into a trap. The system has recommended that the gentleman leave this location immediately, and Yue urged the thugs to beat up Lee so he wouldn't dare to offend her. Her sister. The bandits instantly rushed towards him. The young man tried to escape. However, one of the big guys still caught up with the guy and grabbed him by his clothes. Seconds later, Sister Anne's sidekick swung his baton. The protagonist tried to swing away but never managed to hurt the thug. Subsequently, Fan was hit on the head with a stick and collapsed to the ground. The bandits in turn began to beat Fan severely. Yue quietly watched the scene, satisfied with the result. Gloating in every way, the girl muttered to him not to dare to offend her sister again, adding that she had to take extreme measures to teach him a lesson. However, at that moment, one of the bandits appeared behind her. Yunbao suddenly grabbed An, saying that she should pay for the favor she had done. The girl demanded that he immediately remove from her his hands. The big man urged her not to be a goody-goody and to thank him. Yue promised to pay Bao the money by punching him in the face. Yun literally became furious, saying that her old man was going to die soon, and if she refuses him a favor, his cronies will give her hell. Afterward, he reached out his hands toward her again, intending to grab her. An realized she couldn't get away from them and started calling for help. Meanwhile, the bandits continued to beat Fan mercilessly. Fan in turn was surprised, for she had fallen into the clutches of the boys summoned by herself. The girl deserved it, of course, but Lee couldn't bear to see what was happening. At that moment, the young man noticed a shard of glass lying on the pavement. In the next second, the protagonist grabbed the glass and began to defend himself with it, formidably stating that they had messed with the wrong person and soon they would find out about it. The guy realized that it was necessary to get out of the situation as quickly as possible. At this time, the head of Zhou ordered his muzzies to kill Fan. Since he hurt his family and sent his daughter to jail, Lee noticed that reinforcements had arrived at the bandits. At this point, the system notified the gentleman of the new option and the achievement of a higher level. This time, the first option was a loyal but naive brother fighter. The second option represented a handsome egomaniac, a party king. Naturally, the protagonist chose the first option, summoning a warrior. Moments later, the big guy arrived on the battlefield. Everyone scattered to the sides. The fighter muttered that no one would dare touch his brother. Fang wondered in surprise if he was the tiger sent by the program. The guy confirmed. Intending to kill them, the young man asked just to beat them up but not to kill them. Lee realized that no one could defeat such a big man, and the bandits would soon be finished. The maddened warrior set about destroying his brother's abusers. Meanwhile, Yunbao continued to terrorize the girl. Yue in turn needed help and didn't know what to do. The boy hurriedly taught him a lesson with his baton and called out to Bao, after which he attacked him by stating that not all girls are the same. In a few minutes, all the thugs were half dead. The boy was genuinely excited to see his brother again. A crying girl suddenly called out to the protagonist. The young man did not understand what she wanted. Fang took another look around the platform where the beaten bandits lay. However, after what she had done, the girl dared to ask Fan to take her home. Naturally, good-natured Lee agreed to escort her out, saying that Yunbao was afraid of everyone, and she instead went to him for help. Yue mouthed that she didn't know about how crazy he was, and he was recommended to her by Shuo, adding that she only wanted revenge for her sister and family. At this moment, Zhu asked him why her sister's entire body was covered in abrasions. Anyue's sister. Anyue hurriedly reassured Shui, saying that he had nothing to do with it, but the wound-up sis didn't want to listen to anything, saying she shouldn't vindicate him, and if he's angry at their family, taking his anger out on a little girl is low. Yue reiterated that he had nothing to do with this and everything was completely wrong. At this time, the main character suddenly grabbed the girl's hand, after which he kissed unexpectedly. The ladies were shocked by this turn of events. Fang in turn pronounced that he had saved her and at the very least deserved a reward. The damsel remarks that he turns out to be a bad man too. The young man then declared that Sister Shui was in his hands and she would not do anything to him. After a while, Li and Yue went into the house where they put her little sister in bed, who passed out from terrible stomach pains brought on by a fit of anger. The boy boiled the porridge and left the tray on the dresser near the bed, stating that she needed, after she woke up, to take her pills and eat at least a little. Yue replied that he couldn't just leave after all. He was the reason she was in this position. The young man headed for the exit, figuring she should explain everything to her sister, since marriage all he has done is explain himself, adding that let her think what she wants about him, he doesn't care anymore. A moment later, Zhu woke up wondering if Fang had cooked this porridge. Yue shouted enthusiastically, happy for her sister, noting her keen sense of smell, for she could tell from the odor that Li had cooked the porridge, asking her to eat it and then drink the necessary medication afterward. However, the weak and sad Zhu refused, calling him a bastard. At that, she asked where he had gone. The sister said she had it all wrong. Ultimately, because of her stubbornness, she forced him to do so. At that moment, behind the door, there was some incomprehensible noise. Their mother's voice could be heard talking about some kind of pretense. An stated that Fan has the nerve to come to their house. One of the exasperated brothers has implied that Li is hoping to get a share of their inheritance. The mother literally pestered the young man, asking where he had put the old man's will. The guy in turn realized that the will was actually missing, adding that since he and Zhu are not divorced, everything he possesses belongs to her. Her brother remarked that when it came to money, she didn't mind their wedding, but she was gossiping about him. The man told Fan that this attitude is because of his mother-in-law. After all, she had spoken ill of him before she was married, and had always been against him. At that moment, the sisters ran out of the room and urged the mother to calm down, having said that he's not really like that, though he has a bad reputation, because even his sister doesn't believe him, and it turns out it was her. The mother replied that if she had married Shuo, there would have been no problem, calling on the guy to give up his will, and then he can stay in their house as long as he wants. Brothers and relatives began to say that he would obviously give a forgery rather than a real document, saying he might not even hope for their money because he's a nobody. The protagonist in turn couldn't stand it, nervously shouting that he didn't care about their money. Moments later, Fan's brother flew into their house and literally brought the wall down. The whole bizarre family froze in bewilderment, not realizing who it was. The enraged big tiger inquired if his brother was his name. Li asked to memorize the faces of these people, and if he met them in the future, he could finish them off without a second thought. The An family was shocked by this statement from the guy. Zhu sadly asked if he meant her too, not understanding why he was so aggressive, for it seemed the misunderstanding had been resolved. The protagonist never answered, realizing that they only cared about money, completely forgetting about his grandfather. Sad Fan and the big tiger were walking down the street. Li stated that there is not one normal person in this family, and he used to tolerate the antics of these people, but not now. Tigre's point is that it's not too late to go back and read them. At that moment, they saw Yunbao being carried away on a stretcher. The guy was dumbfounded when he saw Zhongnan in the crowd of people. Who was Bai's father? The deputy reported that his son had a pretty serious injury. Zhongyan nervously muttered that he didn't want to talk about it right now and demanded that Yun be cured immediately. The bodyguards notified him that old man An's son-in-law, Li Fang, had done it. Bai's angry father said he would destroy him. Meanwhile, the guy and his brother Tiger hid behind a rock. The system reported that the enemy had weapons, so it was best to leave. Brother Tiger inquired if they would not engage in a fight. The main character said they have guns and it's pointless. It's not even a matter of cowardice. While coming out of hiding, Big Brother accidentally snagged a rock, causing it to break. Zhongyan ordered the bodyguard, immediately check what the sound was. Armed bandits headed towards Fan, who in turn didn't know how he could get away from them. The system swept that the enemy would detect the host after 30 seconds. Li picked up the brick in his hands, intending to give battle even in this situation. Xuan offered the protagonist a program to save his life. The angry guy stated that she should have mentioned it sooner. The first option was the goat, which gave the young man a chance to escape. The second option was the tiger, which had to be summoned. Feng muttered that these were extremely incomprehensible and horrible scenarios. The program reminded him that he was 10 seconds away from being detected. Li realized if he chose the first option, he would be putting Big Brother in danger. The second, sure way to die. But the protagonist decided to choose the second option because he did not want to frame his brother. Suddenly, literally out of nowhere, the young man had a loudspeaker. At this moment, the boy was discovered by Zhongyan's bodyguards, which they hurriedly reported to their master. Fang took in more air and shouted loudly into the horn, summoning the tiger. The bewildered bodyguards thought the kid had lost his mind. Meanwhile, there was a rescue helicopter on approach. Li looked up into the sky in surprise. Moments later, the helicopter began shooting the bandits with a machine gun. The terrified guards panicked, scattered in different directions. The girl threw down a rope ladder to the main character, calling for the guy to immediately climb into the helicopter to escape. Big Brother followed Fan, climbing up the stairs, and accidentally nudged the young man. Thus, Li literally flew into the surprised aid. Like a true gentleman, he apologized to her. As he climbed into the helicopter, he heard a rather familiar voice. Chen muttered that they were lucky to hear his call, as it was extremely difficult to find him. The protagonist was surprised to see Shan in front of him. Guo had noticed that the news of Fang's dealings with Yun Bao had traveled all over the city, and his father wouldn't let it go. Li was pleased to know that besides Grandpa An, there were people willing to stand up for him. Chen stated that the kid had crossed the path of the biggest powers that weren't worth messing with. The young man replied that they were the ones who were always after him, and he was only defending himself, adding that they should stop harassing him as he will not give a slack. In response, Shan laughed out loud, noting the boy's bravery. Afterward, Gu gave him the documents that Old Man An had asked him to hand over. It turned out to be an agreement to transfer the inheritance and share ownership of the An family. Chen muttered that in this way, the young man would seize incredible resources, and the entire family would be under his control. As such, not even Wu Kunan himself would be able to do anything to him. It was as if Grandpa had sensed it, so he gave these documents to Shang because his family could not be counted on. In all his life, Hai had never known trouble in business. Zhou family, however, drove him to a heart attack. The protagonist inquired if it was at home. Gu replied in surprise that it was at home that the attack happened. Fang muttered that he had given him an 800-year-old ginseng root, with the help of which there was a chance of cure, assuming that there was a traitor in the An family and that he was the one who caused the old man's illness. Li returned the documents to Chen, saying that he was not allowed to appear in An's house right now. Shan stated that his grandfather had placed his hopes on him, and he had chickened out. The maiden remarks that he really can't go back to the An family after all. He doesn't know who the traitor is. Besides, if the family passes into his hands, the traitor will take on the old man, and Lu Shuo along with Zhou will try to destroy him. Therefore, it is initially necessary to eliminate this threat. Gu pulled the young man aside, stating that he had a good plan. After divorcing Xue, he has to marry Chen's daughter. Shan said that such an alliance no one would dare attack, but the daughter was against it. Her father was forever trying to marry her off. Gu stated that this guy was smart and brave enough. The system offered him a change of family, but Fan refused. Li then went to notify Zhang that he was moving out of her house. The girl's reaction was pretty aggressive. Yes said he could leave to his Xue. The young man replied that he wasn't moving in with her, but the young lady didn't want to hear anything, pelting him with bags of belongings. The protagonist realized that female jealousy is like a volcano. However, he really needed to move out so he wouldn't drag Chan into his problems. The guy intended to buy a new house with the money he had saved up, subsequently headed to a real estate center where he asked for a cottage for 5 million. Hearing this, Liu Shuo wondered if he really wanted to live in the toilet. Fang thought he was stalking him. The female employee immediately ran up to Xuan and started grooming him, asking an employee to look for a cottage for 20 million, by specifically spelling out that only scum live in a house for less than that price. Li understood. Shuo deliberately put his position on display. Liu stated that by forcing him out of the streamer platform, he had not won. And he doesn't care about that, because he already has plenty of money, having swept up that they're from different worlds, adding that he won't even feel it after spending 20 million. The guy confidently stated, he has a lot of money too, and just because he doesn't brag about it doesn't mean he doesn't have opportunities. Then he asked me to show him a cottage for 50 million. Fang defiantly turned to Shuo, saying that his house was only worth 30 million. The system reminded her that the host didn't have that much money on the card, but the young man urged her to calm down. Meanwhile, Li and Xuan kept upping the ante, requesting to inspect homes for 70 million and up. People began to turn around, wondering who dared to compete with the rich Shuo. Furious Liu couldn't believe the guy could afford a cottage for that kind of money. The main character provoked him on purpose, saying he was rather insecure, offering to buy the house after he bought his own place. Xuan immediately threw the map on the table and ordered a villa for himself for 120 million. The smiling damsel congratulated him on his purchase, handing him the key to the cottage. Liu was dumbfounded that he had spent that kind of money, but he was too eager to show the guy his superiority. After that, Fan asked the girl to sell him the house for 5 million. Li literally scoffed at Shuo, saying that they hadn't agreed on the cost. With that, Xuan immediately attacked him with his fists, but Big Brother suddenly grabbed his arm, warning him if he touched the young man, he would not be well, then delivered a crushing blow that sent Liu flying off to the side. The protagonist rushed to play the lottery after purchasing a cottage. The program awarded a gift to the Lord for humiliating the foolish Shuo. The first option provided the opportunity to become taller by 10 centimeters, the second an elite mansion. Naturally, the guy chose the villa. The female employee gave the hammer to him, asking him to break one of the eggs on the table. Fang confidently headed to the table where he hurriedly cracked a golden egg, subsequently won a luxury estate worth 1 billion. Everyone present was shocked by this result, starting to take pictures with the lucky guy. Once outside, they were met by Shuo and his cronies, urging them to give him the estate. Li began to banter with him, saying that his $120 million doghouse was apparently cramped. Xuan threatened him with his goons if the guy didn't hand over his winning villa. Liu realized that his father would kill him if he found out about buying a house for 120 million, especially with the company's budget. Big Brother asked the protagonist about killing these scumbags. At this moment, Qing Chen came out to them, urging them not to make a showdown. She said she heard about a young man winning the top prize in her company. Fang assumed that Gao had rigged the lottery to marry off his little girl to him. After a while, Li and Qing were riding in her car. The guy swept up her timely appearance. Chen thanked the young man, for he had helped her sell a mansion worth 100 million. The protagonist asked if 100 million wasn't chump change to them. After all, they had drawn the prize for 1 billion. Qing explained that the family estate was not for sale, so it was raffled off, adding that this is the official version. In reality, things are somewhat different, saying that this mansion was her family's most prized possession. However, on the day of its opening, there was thunder and lightning. Subsequently, there was a fire and people started running away in panic. After that, whoever settled on the estate was at best broke and failing. At worst, people died for unknown reasons or drank themselves to death. An elder said that no one could withstand the might of the imperial mansion. Shan realized that even his family was unable to bear such an ordeal, putting him on the lottery. After a few minutes, they pulled up to this house. Qing wondered if he would dare settle in. Fan could literally feel the energy of this mansion. Li felt he could stand and pass the test of home. After all, he was an unusual man and fearlessly headed inside. The girl marveled. Qing suddenly grabbed his hand, saying that she wasn't joking about the house. The smiling guy wondered why she was so worried about him, adding that true emperors have always been fearless. So he needs to head inside the mansion without fear. All the more reason for him to win it in the lottery, which means he is destined by fate to live in it. The protagonist took a couple more steps as suddenly his feet were enveloped by some sort of magic. The young man glared menacingly at the sky, muttering that it was time to honor the emperor. At this moment, literally from the heavens into the ground, a beam of fire rushed out. The guy stepped back. It seemed like an endless stream coming from the cosmos itself. After a few seconds, suddenly everything disappeared and the sun shone brightly. A surprised Qing muttered as the terrifying aura dissipated in an instant. Fang declared that there would no longer be a bad atmosphere in his house. The girl suddenly remembered her father's words. Gu told her that if the young man really turned out to be a descendant of the emperor, she should grab hold of him, since marriage to such a person is something they have always dreamed of. Qing blushed. Li asked if she was sick. The maiden said she would visit him after and hurriedly withdrew. The boy began to look around the estate. He enjoyed walking around the grounds of the mansion. The system could not recognize the location in question, so it asked if it could start the mystery-solving mode. Asking his master to make up his mind, the young man realized that it was a hidden module of the program. Qing rushed to her father, telling him what had happened. Shan urged her to immediately envelop Fan with her charms, adding if she needed to buy some things for herself, he would help her. Meanwhile, Li had reached the point of crossing destiny. Finding himself in the water, the guy began to panic. The system stated that he was in the stream of consciousness, and he need not worry, for he would not drown here. The protagonist didn't realize that stream of consciousness is actually material. Down below, the young man saw himself lying on the ground, surrounded by Lu and Shui, as if he had glimpsed into the future. A distraught Xuan urged his cronies to kill him immediately, and began to discourage Xiao from brutally beating the young lad. However, Lu seemed to lose his head and suddenly grabbed her, covering her mouth with his hand. At the same time, he stated that she was a backup for him, and it was not worth it to think of yourself as a queen. The frightened girl couldn't understand what he was talking about. Xuan took stock of the fact that if it wasn't for their company, he wouldn't have looked in her direction at all. And now that he's killed the old man, she and her family are no longer worth a dime. A bloodied Fan declared that Lu would be held responsible for Grandpa Hai's murder. Xiao began to beat him up even more, saying that if it wasn't for Li, he would have been at the head of the An family long ago. Even the bodyguards felt like their boss was overdoing it. They were uncomfortable watching what was happening. Xuan menacingly muttered that he was no imperial descendant, then ordered his goons to throw his body in the pool to make it look like an accident, adding that since no one but him could live in that mansion, he would die there. Lu then looked at Shui and ordered the guards deliver her to the Zhou family. The dumbfounded girl realized that he had actually decided to sell her. Xiao stated that she owed it to her, by any means necessary, to get her hands on Zhou's company's main project, or he would trash her. The girl began to balk, saying he had no right to do that to her. The bodyguards took the protagonist under their arms and carried him to the pool. Half-dead Fan realized what an imperial fate she was. Li was unwilling to accept such an outcome. Meanwhile, his body was sinking in the water. The guy was mentally asking for one last chance to reverse all the setbacks. At this moment, the Xuan system floated over to him and urged him to prepare for a new life. Moments later, the young man woke up on a chaise lounge near the pool on the grounds of his mansion. Looking around fearfully, Fang asked the program if he had been reborn. The system responded that he had restarted his life, and it showed him an alternate destiny for him. Suddenly, Li realized that the system was doing everything it could to make sure no one could live in this house. After all, she had been waiting for him to appear since he was a descendant of the Emperor, and that was why no one had survived in this estate. The protagonist had no idea his other lifeline was so bleak. The system had picked up on the fact that he'd done pretty well for himself lately, as Chan had escaped a deadly fate. The An family in turn did not go bankrupt and live quite normally. The only thing is, the old man was left crippled and even ginseng root didn't help him. Xuan looked at the guy sadly, muttering that it was fate, adding that every choice he made brought destiny back to its original form, otherwise he would be dead by now. The young man uttered extremely confidently that he would not die, and since he's chosen by someone from above, he's not going to let anyone change that. The program-savvy woman also intends to deal with her abusers. At this time, a woman's voice suddenly called out to the young lad. The girl mumbled that it had been long enough since they had seen him, wondering if he remembered her. Turning around, the surprised protagonist recognized her as Ren Qianzhou. He couldn't understand what she was doing here. Jen began to look around, assuming that this was the An family's domain, which she asked the guy about. The disgruntled young man reluctantly replied that it was his estate. Qianzhou took out her phone and asked if she could take a couple pictures. Fan muttered that he was okay with that in principle. The damsel began taking pictures at every turn against the backdrop of the mansion, while Li tried to figure out what the faculty's chief beauty was up to. Jen, in turn, was very beautiful and friendly. Even with a brat like him, Qianzhou was always nice. However, quite a few people had been fooled by her fake exterior, including him. The guy started reminiscing about his college years when he saw her in a class. Jen entered the auditorium and asked if she could sit down next to him. Naturally, the young man did not refuse her. On the contrary, since he felt sympathy for her, Fan did her homework for her. Smiling, Qianzhou was sincerely grateful to Li for helping her. Wang Tianlei told Fan Guan that his girlfriend was being tried by their classmate, and exasperated Guan swept up that he needed to be taught a lesson. After studying, the protagonist was beaten up by teenagers while Ren was out with Fan, who gave her a purse. The girl was delighted and thanked him. Guang asked why she was socializing with Li. The girl replied that if he didn't help her with her studies, she wouldn't have approached him at all. Meanwhile, the young man continued to be brutally beaten by Guan's cronies. The guy heard Jen talking about him, calling him disgusting, and she doesn't like him at all. To make matters worse, Guan bribed the entire university, and Fan was kicked out of the institution. The protagonist couldn't find a place to be, thinking about the corrupt Qianzhou. At this moment, Big Brother walked over to him and saw Lee's infuriated state. The young man was genuinely happy to meet his best friend. A guy asked a tiger to help him with a case. The girl continued to take pictures at Fan's luxurious estate. Suddenly, the huge Lee brother appeared in front of her. Ren didn't realize what was happening. The surprised girl asked who he was and where her classmate had gone. He suddenly grabbed her hair, pulling her off the ground. Qianzhou didn't realize what was happening. The dazed damsel was loudly calling for help. The surrounding people were bewildered, after which the guy sloped her in front of everyone, claiming she was a thief. The townspeople didn't understand how such a young and pretty enough girl could turn out to be a thief, started taking pictures of her to spread on the internet. The protagonist was watching her from the window of his mansion. The system swept up. She hadn't expected such a reaction from Fan, who had specifically asked her brother to throw her out. Because he is still studying with her at the institute at this time, Lee's phone received a message asking him to return to his studies. The crafty kid claimed he could still use her for revenge at the university. The young man wanted to use her for his own purposes, stating that he would deal with anyone who slung mud at him. Surprisingly, the system supported him in this, urging him on to begin his introduction. Meanwhile, the exiled Qianzhou overheard the conversation between two guys on the street, who discussed the new tenant in the cottage settlement and gave his name. She also heard that the mansion in question is worth $1 billion. Jen was shocked by this information, for she had assumed that this was not his home. If she married him, she could take half the property. Qianzhou thought this was her chance, since Fang was divorcing Shui. The damsel was already imagining herself swimming in money. The guys in turn turned their attention to her, saying she didn't belong here. Since a beggar can't be in an elite residential area, Jen hurriedly fled. After a while, Guang and Qianlei were socializing at the university. Wang had a hint that Li was returning to the institute today, and could get back at them since he was now in a wealthy family. A confident Guan declared that the Yan family didn't care about him, adding that his uncle is in the school management, so Fan will soon be expelled. Besides, if he sees him, he'll give him a couple smacks on the head. Fang had summarized that this world was cruel and dangerous for someone who had no power and no money. After that, they headed to the auditorium. Opening the door, the boys froze in place, since there was a buffet in the office which was full of different foods. The students were all excited, saying they even got a cook. At that moment, Lee noticed them and smiled at the guys. He began to literally mock them and said that he didn't call for the two-timers, especially there was no room for them. The students found this behavior of a self-confident young man quite amusing. An extremely surprised Fang wondered if he had arranged it. The protagonist replied that he had merely decided to celebrate his return by spending 100,000. Qianlei was shocked to hear such an amount of money. Guan stated that he didn't care how much he spent and gave him 3 days to get out of here. Fan said that having a relative of his in the school's management does not give him the right to behave like this. Then he asked his little brother to show him something. Wang An turned on the TV where the principal of the educational institution blabbed that his uncle was fired because he was caught taking bribes. Fan's face changed, assuming that Li was involved. The young man stated that his relative had committed many crimes, and he did not have to spend a lot of money to buy dirt on him. The distraught Guan began to threaten him. The lad replied that his uncle had suffered quite a just punishment. After all, Fang himself said that money rules the world, so he clearly showed it. A frightened classmate asked what he was up to. Li Fan assured the bullies that he would not allow them to be expelled, for then he would have no one to harass. The guy suggested to all the gathered students to slap one of the two offending students in order to withdraw 1,000 yuan from his card. The students' offers were immediately responded to by many people who wanted the money. The crowd of students immediately rushed after the guys, eager to participate in Li Fan's game. The two guys were surprised at the number of people wanting to punch them in the face and got really scared when they saw the crowd. The guys didn't think for long and immediately started running away while cursing Li Fang. One of the rich guy's friends called his problem-solving methods pretty atrocious. The guy also said that it was unnecessary to spend money on these guys, and it was better to just sick his older brother on them. But the student himself replied that money was only needed to spend it. Li Feng also continued his thought and added that with any capital, you can't just sit back and start a business, and he also asked to look for Ren Qianzhou. Meanwhile, the joyful girl was taking pictures with her phone camera. A notification came to the beauty, and she decided to record a short video for her subscribers. The girl turned to her audience and said that a new handbag was on the market that cost 65,000, so she needed donations. After her address, Ren thought of her subscribers as a bunch of beggars who can't part with a few hundred yuan, but that purse wouldn't leave her mind, and she began to hope that someone would still buy her pretty face. And such a person really found. One man offered to buy the girl handbags and repair her laptop. She immediately realized that she wanted to get into bed. But to the great fortune of the girl herself, Li Fan appeared in the store and held out his bank card. The guy said he could pay for that bag for the girl with no problem and called it nothing. The beauty plugged in all her skills and confusedly asked if he could really give her such an expensive item. The student realized that he had already paid for the purchase, but the girl continued to hone her acting skills on him. The girl turned to face the guy and thanked him for the expensive gift. Li Fan reminded the girl about tonight and said that he didn't have a date, so he offered her to keep him company. The girl was even more embarrassed after such an offer, but there was no way she could refuse. It was already evening and the guy was winding up all his guests with a microphone in hand, promising them a stormy night for tonight. Li Fan asked all the guests to greet each other louder, and they in turn thanked the guy for the warm welcome. Chen Qing also came to the party and found the guy and said that they hadn't seen each other for only a couple of days, and he was already being called Mr. The girl picked up on the fact that the young guy knows how to quickly win people's hearts. The guy was slightly surprised to see his old acquaintance and headed over to chat with her. Chen Qing told the guy about inviting golden youths, young models, and internet stars. Li Fan quickly expanded his social circle, and the girl asked the question, how did he do it? The student replied that he just pleased the famous girl, after which he asked her to contact them. And now not only the students of the university, but also the top of the society know who Li Fan is. The guy also revealed that he plans to create his own streamer site soon. Li Fan said that all these bloggers and golden youth will become his best propaganda capital. Chen Qing started to look at the guy with apprehension after he said what he wanted to do to all the youths. The ambitious student continued his thought and said that the students would become his most loyal followers. Li Fan added that with money, popularity, and recognition, he will be able to accomplish great things. The girl quietly said about Anshui missing such a man from her life, so he could be a great fortune for Chen Qing herself. The guy heard the girl trying to say something and asked her what she was talking about, but she started to refuse. Li Fan put his hand on the girl's forehead and said that her face was flushed, then asked if she had overdrunk. The party starter said he was about to ask someone to take the girl to the restroom. An excited Chen Qing said that there was no need to take her anywhere and confirmed that she was fine. The girl remembered that she had come to give the boy a message. The girl said that she was able to find the skillful doctor that Li Fan had mentioned, however. He had already been invited by Mr. Zong Nan. After that, Chen quickly left the guy, saying that she had more important things to do, while Li Fan himself was trying to figure out where she was in such a hurry. Also, another girl came to the guy's house, who recognized the daughter of Chen Qing, the owner of the real estate company. The girl was surprised at Chen Qing's acceptance of the guy's invitation for this evening. Li Fan saw Bai Feng Huang and wondered, when did she make it in time for him not to notice her? An angry Chen Qing stood outside and talked about how she was annoyed by everything around her. The girl tried to cool down and realized that just the mere sight of the guy made her heart ready to jump out of her chest. She had never experienced anything like this before. Chen Qing spotted a company of ambassadors walking towards Li Fan's house, discussing how to beat up a guy. The guys continued to describe in detail how they would cripple the guy, and Chen Qing decided that this couldn't just be left alone. The girl called the guys over to her and warned the guys not to lay a finger on the guy. The girl's main threat was that any action towards Li Fan would be taken as against the Chen family. One of the thugs recognized the girl and realized that Chen Qing had leaned towards Li Fan's side. The bullies asked the girl what kind of relationship she had with the guy, since she was ready to protect him at the cost of her family. The ringleader also explained that the guy is not only guilty to him, but also to Lu and WU's families who also laid their eyes on him. Chen Qing named him as her spouse chosen by her father, so the bond they have is the closest. The bullies said that the guy doesn't miss a single skirt. First it was Anshui, now it was Chen Qing. The guys said that luck was on their side today, but they wouldn't just leave Li Fan behind. All of this was overheard by Anshui, who hid behind a tree. The girl called the guy an asshole and accused him of moving out on her for a rich girl. The offended girl was filled with a desire for revenge and promised herself that the guy wouldn't just get away with it. In Li Fan's house, the raucous party continued as the guy stood with Bai Feng Huang on the stairs. The guy mockingly asked if it was the university's most unavailable beauty who had come to see him. Li Fan hid the vial in the inner pocket of his jacket and greeted the girl. The girl asked the guy not to make a fool of himself, and said that he himself had asked Ren Qianzhou to invite her. The beauty said the guy purposely hid that it was him because he was afraid of rejection. The girl recalled that she had already rejected the student's declarations of love, and asked if he was still hoping for a relationship with her. Bai Feng Huang also assumed that the guy wanted to slap her in the face, showing her what he was able to accomplish and who she missed out on. Li Fan himself was glad that the girl didn't hear his conversation about the doctor and Wu Zongyan. The guy confirmed that he was indeed afraid that the girl would reject his invitation, but he did not call her for revenge or declarations of love, but for cooperation. But first, Li Fan decided that it was worth it to convince the girl that he really had strength. The guy asked the girl to take a good look at his abilities and walked away, leaving her alone. Bai Feng Huang immediately noticed that this guy was different from the swagger she knew. The girl recalled how the guy told her how he felt, and she humiliated him for his financial situation. Belle stared at the back of the departing guy and tried to figure out what could have happened to make him like this. The guy was only thinking of one thing, how he could quickly look at the data Chen Qing had given him so that Wu Zongnan wouldn't get ahead of him. A girl stood in Li Fang's way who scared him a lot and asked him to make a choice. She suggested a large gift of procreation or a worn baseball bat that would bring mutilation. The embarrassed guy thought for a while and decided he didn't like the baseball bat option at all. Meanwhile, in Li Fang's room, the window was open with light shining brightly from it. A woman's hand lit the scented candles, and the girl herself prepared the romantic atmosphere. It was Qianzhou, who had put on beautiful sleeping clothes and was preparing for a night with Li Fan. From the street side, a man was caught at the window about to break into the room. The girl's leisure was interrupted by the silhouette of a young boy who had entered the sleeping room through the window. The girl couldn't recognize the face of the uninvited guest and thought it was Li Fan who was acting strangely. Meanwhile, the intruder swore that Li Fan would not even live to see tomorrow. Qianzhou pressed herself against the guy from behind and said that the guy was not looking for easy paths in his life. The girl put her hand on the intruder's shoulder and said she was very cold while she was waiting for him. Qianzhou still thought it was Li Fan, so she asked the guy to warm her up. Fan Guang thought that if Li Fan had gotten himself a seductress, he couldn't miss this opportunity. The guy turned toward the girl and pulled her closer to him, grabbing her waist. The unwelcome guest told the girl that since she was the first to spread her arms, he would not restrain himself. When the guy turned around, Qianzhou immediately recognized him as Fan Guang and abruptly let go of his hand. The surprised guy also recognized the girl and asked if she should be preparing for her performance in the library right now. Qianzhou pushed the guy away from her and asked him to forget about her. Fan Guang fell on the floor and the girl told him about them breaking up because Li Fan is her new boyfriend. The guy didn't want to believe it and asked the girl to stay, assuring her that she was the last thing left in his life. The girl regretfully told the guy that he really didn't have anything else left. Qianzhou also said that Li Fan is now the owner of an estate worth $1 billion. The beauty asked the intruder to get out of her sight and not to interfere with her path to becoming the richest mistress. Fan Guang was beyond angry and feeling resentful, for he had complete confidence in his girlfriend. The guy got to his feet and headed towards the girl, calling her a traitor. The scumbag took the girl by the throat and promised he would kill her. Fan Guang explained to Qianzhou that if she wanted to become Li Fang's woman, they would die together. But then Li Fan himself, who had a baseball bat in his hands, also came to the door of the sleeping room. The guy opened the door to the room with his foot and said he was choosing the baseball bat option. The frightened Qianzhou saw the guy and started asking for help with her hoarse and weakened voice. Fan Guang promised that he would finish the guy off once he dealt with Qianzhou, but Li Fan himself was faster and was able to use the baseball bat much earlier. The guy explained to the intruder that he would not allow him to kill people on his property. Li Fan began to praise the baseball bat that had an auto-avoidance injury function. Charged with the necessary enthusiasm, the student said that Fan Guang would answer for all his bullying today. The guy proceeded to beat his assailant in the face with the bat while he could still breathe. While Li Fan was beating up Fan Guang, Qianzhou began to shout that a person was being killed here. The scumbag's face turned into a horrible mess and the guy stopped. The student ordered Wang An to throw Fan Guang out into a crowded area of the manor. The guy wanted everyone to see what happens to those who get in Li Fan's way. The guy also pointed at Qianzhou and said that it was okay to throw her out as well, because there was no longer any use in the girl anyway. The girl hadn't expected such a reaction from the guy, and reminded him that he needed a date. Qianzhou had already taken her hands and she protested to be let go, but it was all in vain. The guy said he did need a date, but he didn't say she would be the one. Li Fan called the girl corrupt and said that he had no need for such, then asked if she had also done the same to him. Li Fan's friends were already taking out the uninvited guests, and Qianzhou was trying to apologize to the guy. Li Fangnika couldn't get excited about such a cool baseball bat and said that he should use this thing more often. But the guy was reminded that the props provided by the system can only be used once. After all the uninvited guests were taken out of the room, the guy remembered that he needed to look at the materials that Chen Qing had obtained from the doctor. The guy inserted the flash drive into his computer and asked himself, could these materials bring Grandpa An back to life? Li Fan saw that the doctor's name was Saiken Looney and realized that he had called many doctors but had never met such a name before. After looking at the doctor's picture, the guy realized he was also a cook. Li Fan talked to Chen Qing on the phone and asked the girl about how he had gotten into a tangle with Wu Zongnai. Chen said that after the guy had broken Wu Zongnai's dignity, then he began to look for skillful doctors in hopes of healing. Lo and behold, he found Saiken Looney. Li Fan remembered how he had crippled Zunyi and realized that if the doctor was able to heal him, he was really good. The guy was distracted from his phone conversation with Chen by his friend grabbing his jacket. The guy pointed in the direction of a small company and said there was someone they wanted there. The doctor Li Fang needed was indeed standing there, next to a man in a suit. Li Fan confirmed that this was the man they needed, but the guy also noticed that he had a strange expression on his face. A man from the Wu family who was looking after Su Konglun warned the doctor not to even think of running away. This conversation was overheard by Li Fan, who said that in addition to Wu Zongyan, there was also him. The guy told the doctor that he would be under his protection from today and asked him to follow him. The guard told the guy that he had very great ambitions. He also asked if the young man knew who the doctor had crossed. The man added that Si Kunlun was now under Wu Zongnai's protection, and it would be hard to change his mind. Li Fan didn't pay attention to the guard's words and simply walked past him to the doctor. The guy said that he was the one who humiliatingly beat up Zunyi, which means if he's still alive, it speaks to his greatness. When the guard heard about this guy beating up his boss, he went into shock. First, Su Konglun appreciated Li Fang's techniques that the guy had used against Zongnai. The doctor liked the guy's suggestion. He believed that the Wu family was notorious, and in case Li Fan really possessed such strength, he would immediately sever relations with the Wu family. But it was very important for Si Kunlun to make sure that Li Fan really did possess such strength. The angered guard, upon hearing that this guy had injured Mr. Wu, immediately headed in his direction and promised to teach him a good lesson. The man had already taken a swing at Li Fan, but the man asked his friend to help him with the aggressive bodyguard. Li Fan's friend stopped the man by grabbing his head and tossing him aside. Seo Kunlun's bodyguard had no time to do anything to the big man before he was already beating his head against the pavement. The guard was already unconscious, but the ambo didn't stop and continued beating the poor guy. Li Fan pointed to his friend beating up a man and said that this guy was a master of his craft. Su Konglun said, "This clearly shows the superiority of Li Fang's forces." The doctor assured the lad that this was enough for him to follow. Li Fan brought Si Kunlun straight to the hospital where Grandpa An is currently recovering. At first, the guy asked why there was no one around to take care of the old man. The girl said that recently a scandal broke out in the An family over the division of inheritance, and after that, the old man did not regain consciousness. The girl also added that apart from his granddaughter Ian Shui, no one came to visit her grandfather. Li Fan told the girl that she could go and he would call her if she needed anything, after which he asked Si Kunlun what was the old man's condition. The doctor said Anna's grandfather's blood and vitality were stagnant, but it was still possible to save him. But the doctor himself cannot promise anything, and the old man will be able to wake up only at the command of heaven. Su Konglun said he could restore Grandpa's blood circulation with acupuncture, but it would take 500-year-old ginseng root to awaken him. Li Fan said he didn't possess any medicine, but he could get 800 ginseng roots. Hearing such a figure, the doctor assured the lad that it would be quite enough to help the old man. The doctor thought about how the guy had easily said he would get 800 ginseng roots, and realized that he had made the right choice in following him. Li Fan had already left the hospital, and was thinking about how he could get his grandfather out of the hospital and get the ginseng roots. The guy, after briefly thinking, realized that he would have to find An Shui in order to get the old man. But Li Fang himself didn't want to see the old man's granddaughter at all after everything. The boy spoke quietly about wanting to learn how to teleport, and the fairy heard it. Li Fan asked the system why he had never been endowed with any abilities. The guy also added that his skills were too passive, and the girl laughed softly. The girl said that the host had made a request for personal ability enhancement, and the system was ready for fulfillment. A surprised Li Fan asked why he hadn't been told about such a function before, and the system reminded him that it was only a passive ability. The guy was given a choice of option A, in which he was getting strong, and option B, in which he would have superior visual speed. Li Fan eyed option A and asked if he could save it until next time. The girl said that the system had detected an untrue projection in the host's mind, so she had to issue a warning. Eventually, the young lad chose option B, and the second the ability improvement began. The master's eyes gained an uncanny ability to pick up images. A strong conflict broke out in An Yusei's office. The girl was trying to protect her sister with her screams. The girl explained to Mr. Wu that he had no right to offend his sisters, even if the An family was in a predicament. Mr. Wu only laughed and reminded the girl that An Yusei had caused his son to become disabled. The man said all he wanted was for Yusei to help leave a receiver for the Wu family, since she deprived his son of that opportunity. The cheeky man mockingly asked the girls who was offending who else here. Mr. Wu got up from his chair and decided to remind the sisters about some more details. Guest explained that Yusei's folks had already given their consent, so the girls' protests were misplaced. A frightened An Yusei started screaming loudly and asking her sister for help, not wanting to go with the man. Mr. Wu grabbed Yusei's hand and said that the decision had already been made, so he would not leave alone, neither the girl nor Li Feng. The sister tried to defend her sister and asked the man to come to his senses and remove his hands, but Mr. Wu didn't care anymore. He pushed the girl away from him and called her stupid. The girl flew straight into the hands of the Li Feng who appeared, telling Mr. Wu that he and his son had a lot in common. The sisters immediately recognized the guy, so they had hope of rescue. Li Fan said that he was the one who turned Wu Zongnan into a eunuch and asked him to deal with him. Next, the guy hid the girl behind his back and asked Mr. Wu to deal with him. The man's attention shifted to the guy and he asked again, was it definitely Li Fan? The man talked about how he had sent many people to look for him, and now he had come to him himself. Taking the gun out of his jacket, Mr. Wu promised the boy about the fact that he would regret his birth. Mr. Wu pushed An Yusei away and said that he would finish off Li Fan today no matter what it cost him. The aim of the gun was already on the guy's forehead, but Li Fan himself remained calm. The guy grabbed his gun and said it wasn't nice to shoot an unarmed man, especially since there were witnesses here who could call the police and testify. A surprised Mr. Wu asked the guy if he really thought his words would get away with it. The guy continued to remain calm and explained that he wanted to play a game with the man. But this game has a condition. If Li Fan loses, Mr. Wu kills him. But if the guy wins, the Wu family will leave him and his sisters alone. The guy snatched the gun out of the thug's hands and looked contemptuously in his direction. The man still didn't understand what Li Fan was up to, so he just stared at him. Li Fan continued to hold the gun in his hands and reminded him that his game would be dangerous. The guy pulled out a drum magazine and took almost all the rounds out of it, leaving only one. Mr. Wu smiled and said that he was interested in observing what the young lad was up to. The guy said it was very simple and he and Mr. W were about to play Russian roulette. That's where the guy's super speed vision came in handy, to anticipate which shot would be his last. The guy's hand slid the trigger on the revolver and he continued to stare at his opponent. With a sharp movement, Li Fan unscrewed the drum of the revolver and the Russian roulette began. With his new ability, Li Fan tried to catch the moment when the gun would be unloaded. Despite all the confidence before the game, the guy was still afraid that he might make a mistake. Li Fan pointed the muzzle of the revolver at his temple and nervously kept his finger on the trigger. And Yusei asked the guy not to do anything stupid and leave the revolver aside. But the guy himself did not think to obey the girl, because he himself had suggested this game. The guy pulled the trigger and no shot followed, but the snap caused everyone to get emotional and resounded throughout the room. Li Fan said that there were only 6 rounds in the clip and he had only 1 round left, which would be fatal for one of them. The guy held out his revolver toward Mr. Wu and said it was his turn to test his luck. A cold sweat ran down the man's face. He was afraid that he might shoot himself right now. Mr. Wu laughed nervously and praised the guy for having the guts to test his luck. The man pushed Anne's sister toward the guy and hid the revolver back in his jacket. As he left, Mr. Wu told the guy that he was letting him go today, but he also warned Li Fan to stay out of sight. The girl burst into tears in the guy's arms and thanked him for coming to them. And Yusei looked at the guy and asked, why was it that he was the one who decided to come to them today? Li Fan rightly pointed out that if he hadn't come, and Yusei wouldn't have been able to protect her sister, so it was worth thanking him. A disgruntled An Yusei tried to say something to the guy, but she didn't have time and the guy interrupted her. Li Fan said that he had found a doctor who could help his grandfather, but it would require moving the old man from the hospital to his place. The guy also explained that he needed 8-year-old ginseng root. The girl expressed her hope that the guy really needed ginseng root for his grandfather. And Yusei also revealed that the most skilled doctors were unable to heal the old man, so putting him in Li Fan's hands was tantamount to death. The angry Li Fan asked the girl to shut her mouth and do as he asked. The guy started reprimanding An Yusei for not giving the root in time, and after his coma, they started dividing the inheritance. Li Fan said he could solve all of the An family's problems and keep the Wu, Zhou, and Lu family in line if that's what it took. The guy made a point of saying that he was able to achieve everything that the girl never dreamed of, so she has no right to ridicule him. Li Fan said that the An family was in danger of collapse, and Yusei didn't even try to do anything. The younger sister tried to calm the guy down and said that Grandpa would need to be escorted and she would help with that. Li Fan calmed down and the girl led him away from An Yusei so that a new scandal wouldn't start. The girl also told Yusei that they should try all methods to help Grandpa, and if Li Fan wants to help, he should be listened to. A frustrated An Yusei sat down on the sofa and told herself that she understood everything perfectly. The girl was angered by her sister's closeness with Li Fan, so she said something stupid. Li Fan picked up Grandpa An from the hospital and moved him to his home for treatment. Su Konglun, Li Fan, and the youngest granddaughter watched as the servants groomed the old man. The doctor said he was busy treating Grandpa and asked him to bring him the 800-year-old ginseng root sooner. The girl said that although he was able to discharge her grandfather from the hospital, but she did not know where the ginseng root lies. Li Fan put his hand on the girl's forehead and told her not to worry, and he would think of something. The guy tried to calm his granddaughter down and reassure her that her grandfather would be okay. Chong Li came to the guy's house and saw Li Fan making out with a girl and started yelling at him. The guy turned around when he heard screaming in his house and saw the angry girlfriend. The frightened Li Fan immediately asked the angry Chong Li, what was she doing here? The girl ignored the guy's question and came at him with fists. Chong Li was able to kick the surprised Li Fan in the face in a leap. Not expecting this, Li Fan immediately fell down, and Chong Li continued to beat him with her legs. Finished bullying the guy, Chong Li looked towards the girl who was being comforted by Li Fan. A jealous Chong Li immediately labeled Li Fan as her man and advised the girl to stay away from him. The house continued to burn with a strong scandal between the girls who couldn't share a boyfriend. Younger An reminded Chong Li that Li Fan couldn't be her man since he hadn't divorced Anshue yet. The girls argued about the boyfriend's divorce from Anshu, and the younger sister assured Chong Li that the boyfriend wouldn't become her even after the divorce. Chong Li in turn tried to disappoint the girl, explaining that she was too small for Li Fan. Younger An assured her that she didn't need a boyfriend and Chong Li didn't have to worry about it, so the girls agreed. Li Fan himself was very pleased to see the two girls arguing with each other because of him. The system asked if the guy wanted to stop the two girls, but he liked the feeling too much. Li Fan said he had no right to get involved in the squabbles between the girls. The system spotted another character who could join the fight for the guy. The assistant looked towards An Yusei and told her master that he would die of happiness if this all turned into a fight between three women. An Yusei stood behind the guy's back and asked the girls what they were doing and why did she hear screaming outside the door. Li Fan asked the girl why she had come here, and the girl replied that she wanted to hand over the ginseng root. An Yusei also saw that Zhang Li was here and apologized for disturbing the couple. Su Konglun, Li Fan, and An Yusei stood over the bed where the old man was lying unconscious. Opening the box that the girl brought, the guy saw a small root that didn't look like that ginseng root at all. Li Fan snatched a root out of the box and said that it was nothing like what he had given to Grandpa An. The girl explained that her uncle had hidden the real root, and she couldn't find it. An Yusei searched all over the city, but all she could find was this small stub. Li Fan asked the doctor if this stub could do anything to help his grandfather, and the doctor replied that it would only keep him alive. Su Konglun said that they would need at least 500 years of ginseng root for Grandpa to come out of his coma. The doctor explained that Grandpa's condition was getting worse every day, but Li Fan said he had had enough. The boy asked to take proper care of his grandfather until his return, but An Yusei tried to stop him. Li Fan walked out of the house and An Yusei followed him, trying to find out more about Xiao Kunlun. The girl asked if this was the doctor the guy was talking about, and if he could be relied on. Li Fan reminded the girl that she was unable to obtain the right item, and asked her not to doubt other people's abilities. And Yusei realized that she always underestimated the guy, and he always ended up being right. Plus Li Fan never got any help from her. Li Fan decided to go back and say goodbye to the girls, but he heard them continue to argue amongst themselves. The girls wouldn't stop and tried to accuse each other of looking at other people's boyfriends. Chong Li pulled out of younger An's hands and said she wanted to go with Li Fan. An in turn restrained the girl and said that she wouldn't let Chong Li interfere with Li Fan and Yusa. Chong Li in turn reminded the girl that if Li Fan doesn't divorce Yusei, neither of them will have any schnoss left. Little An thought about Chong Li's words and stopped squeezing her hand. An eventually let go of her opponent's arm completely and stepped away from her. Chong Li was a little surprised at the girl leaving her alone so easily. Chong Li had already grabbed onto the girl herself and asked, did the girl really think she could get Li Fan? From the car, Li Fan asked the girls to behave and said he was leaving on important business but would be back soon. An Yusei was struck by the fact that the guy is so cold to her, but very kind to her sister and young Li. Yusei huffed and tried to figure out how much the guy hated her if he didn't show any emotion at all. The couple arrived at the head office of the An family's company to sneak into the uncle's office. Yusei told the guy that all of her grandfather's birthday presents were taken care of by her uncle, and when she demanded the root, he said he threw it away a long time ago. This infuriated Li Fang, who said that that root was a rare treasure and was worth a huge amount of money. And Yusei remembered her uncle's words and guessed that all he wanted to do was to wait for her grandfather to die and get his hands on the entire inheritance. The girl remembered being told how her uncle had hidden the root in his office's private safe, and Yusei warned that the security system required a face reader so she wouldn't be able to open the safe, and Li Fan replied that he would handle everything. The pair were already approaching Uncle An Yusei's office, and the guy said he would sneak in and get the root. Li Fan also asked the girl to stand guard and warn him if anyone spotted them. A confused An Yusei asked the guy again, would he definitely be able to get the root? Li Fan asked the girl to sit still and just wait for him to return. Upon entering his uncle's office, Li Fan abruptly slammed the door shut and began to look around. With his vision, Li Fan was able to find the cherished safe that was hidden behind the desk. The guy pulled out his toolkit and asked the system for a little help. Li Fan asked if he had auxiliary options this time, or would he have to resort to complicated methods. The guy wasn't bothered by the fact that the sensor alarm might go off no matter what. He had to open that safe. The system called the guy's methods overly reckless and offered him a choice. Option A, which changed the guy's appearance for 20 minutes, and Option B, which gave 500-year-old ginseng root. The boy was looking around his uncle's office and trying to make up his mind. The system also warned the guy that the appearance change option was very dangerous. For Li Fan, this choice was very difficult after all. It was more logical to take a 500-year-old root, but then it would turn out that he was saving on Grandpa An's health. The guy said he was choosing Option A and asked the system to immediately turn him into Enyusei's uncle. The system accepted the host's choice and warned that a 20-minute appearance alteration ability was about to activate. The system activated and Li Fan began to reincarnate into Uncle Enyusei. Already changed in appearance, the guy walked over to the safe and tried to pass the defense. The guy's plan worked. The scan was successful and the safe would be open in a couple seconds. Li Fan pulled the handle and opened Uncle Enyusei's cherished safe with a creak. As expected by the guy, the man hid the ginseng root in his safe. The boy said that if Enyusei's uncle dared to go to the trouble of killing his father for the sake of inheritance, he wouldn't be able to forgive him for it. In addition to the roots, the guy was also able to find upside-down photos that the man had also hidden. The photo was of Enyusei's uncle surrounded by naked girls, and the guy recognized his predilections. Li Fan heard Enyusei, who was standing in front of the door, greet her uncle. The man told his niece that there was no reason for her to wait for him. After all, he had thrown away that root a long time ago, and Li Fan at this time was thinking about how to get out of this situation. The girl was aware of the fact that Li Fan was still in the study, and she could not allow Uncle to pass any further. Enyusei suggested that her uncle go together and visit her grandfather in the hospital, for the man had not been there for a long time. The man asked the girl why she was picking on him and saying he had tons of things to do, asked her to leave him alone. Uncle pushed Enyusei away and walked further towards his office, ignoring her complaints. The man added that the old man will never wake up again, so there is nothing to point out to him here. He also threatened the girl that he will kick her out on the street when he becomes the head of the company. As the man entered the office, he saw a stranger and asked who it was. Li Fan used his ability to change his appearance and reincarnated as one of the girls in the photo. In female form, the guy looked simply gorgeous, and with all his appearance tried to predispose Uncle An to himself. Li Fan got into the role of a girl and called the man dear, then started making eyes at him. The surprised uncle asked the girl what she had come here for and why no warning. The girl said she missed the man, but also added that he apparently didn't care about her, so she should leave. The man recalled that last time the girl had tricked Lu Xiaoshuan into taking some bed shots at Lu Xiaoshuan's behest. Li Fan, upon hearing Lu Xiaoshuan's name, realized that they were both involved in the incident that happened to Grandpa, which meant that he should ferret out more information. The girl said that she was forced to do so because she was scared when Lu Xiaoshuan wants to get Old Man An out of the way. The man said that they would both be left to gain if the old man died, for he himself would get the whole company. Li Fan confirmed his speculation about Enshu's uncle being actively involved. The man held out his palm towards the girl and started flirting with her. Uncle put his hand on his mistress's chest and asked her to tell Lu Xiaoshuan that he would only get the contract and Anshui after the man himself took possession of the company. Li Fan felt the man's hand on his chest and immediately began to panic. The girl-turned guy punched a man in the face and called him a pervert. The uncle himself recoiled in incomprehension to the other end of the room, not expecting such a reaction from the girl. The system reminded the host that he would assume his true form in a moment. Li Fan decided that it was still worth it not to anger the man and called him a varmint. Before exiting, the time for reincarnation ran out and the system returned the guy to his original appearance. On the way out, Li Fan met Enyusei, who said that she was unable to stop her uncle. The guy said that he shouldn't have trusted the girl again, and added that he had managed to take ginseng root. The couple arrived at Li Feng's house, where Su Konglun had set up a bunk for his grandfather. The doctor made a medicine from ginseng root and shoved a spoonful of the potion into the old man's mouth. For the first time in a long time, the old man's face showed the movement of his wrinkles. To the great joy of everyone present, the old man was able to spit up blood, which meant he was coming out of his coma. Enyusei was worried about the old man's condition and asked Grandpa how he was feeling. Li Fan asked Enyusei not to worry and explained that Grandpa had only spit out the blood that had stagnated in the chest area. Su Konglin confirmed the guy's words. Also, the doctor added that he would not forget Li Fan's loyalty and would help him in everything from this day forward. The grandfather called his granddaughter over to him and through a heavy cough asked the girl why he was here. A joyful Enyusei could not believe that Grandpa was able to wake up in such a coma time. Tears of joy appeared in the girl's eyes that her grandfather would be able to bring justice to the company, and Yusei was about to tell her about everything that was going on in their family. But Li Fan stopped her and asked her to wait for the doctor to examine the old man. Xiao Kunlin put his hand on his grandfather's wrist to check his pulse. The doctor said the danger had passed the old man by after he took ginseng root. But that wasn't all, and the doctor said he had to continue eliminating the clots of stale blood from his body. Li Fan asked the doctor to do whatever was necessary and said he would leave them alone with the old man. The guy grabbed Yusei's hand and led him out of the room away from his grandfather so no one could hear their conversation. Li Fan was very angry and strongly held the girl's hand so that she couldn't break free. The guy tossed Yusei aside and the girl pressed her back against the wall. Li Fan came down hard on Yusei for trying to tell all of her family's dirty deeds to her grandfather, who had just come out of a coma. The guy said the old man might not survive a second blow, and the girl burst into tears. And Yusei told the guy in tears that he couldn't imagine how difficult it was for her while Li Fan was living with that girl in his estate, and she was single-handedly trying to keep her family together. Li Fan fell into a stupor after the girl's words and didn't know how to respond to her tears and words. The system warned the guy to quickly calm Yusei down, because if he didn't handle it now, it would be impossible to save the girl later. And Yusei called herself guilty, but after losing her grandfather, then only lies and deceit surrounded her. Now she has no one to trust. The frustrated girl sat down on the floor and said that the guy had never wanted to leave before, then asked why he couldn't come back to her this time. Li Fan put his hand on Yusei's head and said that this world was filled with lies, deceit, and resentment, and everything the guy did for her she took for granted. Guy said the girl has been surrounded by care her whole life, but now it's time to plunge into the harsh reality. The guy's hand tensed and he squeezed Yusei's head softly, trying to convey his thoughts more clearly. Li Fan asked the girl not to roar and listen carefully to what he was saying. The guy said he was able to achieve what he has because of his talent, while Yusei faced cruelty because of her helplessness. These words further hurt the already nearly finished Yusei, who realized that she would now be alone. Li Fan turned around and said that there had been nothing between them for a long time, and asked him not to try to look to him for support and throw their problems onto him. Yusei reached out her hand towards the guy and tried to call him back to her. The guy said that saving her grandfather was the last thing he did for her family. From that moment on, they owed nothing more to each other. After having a heavy conversation with his wife, Li Fan collapsed exhaustedly on the bed. The guy lay there for a long time with his face tucked into the bed, trying to comprehend everything that had happened to him. Li Fan freaked out and said that he was already really sick of everything about his spouse. What annoyed the guy the most was that Yusei had never cared for him, and now she thought she could get it all back with her tears. Li Fan hoped that his spouse wouldn't try to talk to him again, and that it was all Chongli eavesdropping. The girl was sitting in front of the bed and noticing her. Li Fan was greatly startled and asked her, "When did that girl manage to enter?" Chongli asked which girl dared to make the guy so angry and tried to guess. The girl began to list all the possible options, out of which were Yusei, Yue, and Ren Qianzhou. Last of all, she asked about Chen Qing, who called herself his future wife. The girl jumped on the guy and said she guessed why he had so abruptly decided to move away from her. Chongli said that Li Fan just got rich and decided to get rid of the girl. An angry Chongli continued to sit on top of the guy and called him a cheater. Li Fan started to resist and deny everything. The guy said he didn't want to involve the girl in trouble. The guy recalled that the Lu family, Zhou family, Wu family, and even some members of the An family were after him. Li Fan said that it was not safe around him, and it was better to stay as far away from him as possible. Li Fan said he was hard to scare, but he would not involve others in his problems and put them in danger. Chongli believed the guy and asked if he really cared about her that much, and Li Fan said it was true. The guy said that each of his enemies is a member of the oldest clans and families in this city, and now each of these scumbags are after his head and are willing to give anything for the guy's death. Li Fan said that he had to get ahead of them all and crush each one before they came after him. Chongli said that in that case, she definitely shouldn't go anywhere and instead be there for the guy. The girl said that she would watch Li Fan get rid of everyone, and the guy realized that his plan had worked. Li Fan said that if the girl herself came to him, then she really should stay with him. The guy reached out to the girl and said he wanted to hear her call him her husband first. Li Fan reached out to Chongli's neck and started to kiss her gently, but the girl was distracted by the sound of her stomach rumbling. The girl asked Li Fan if he had heard any strange sounds just now. The guy looked away from the girl and actually heard rumbling sounds coming from the big tiger sitting next to him. A startled Li Fan asked the guy when he managed to enter his room unnoticed, and Tiger said that he had been here since the beginning. Tiger said that brother Lun Yi had instructed him to call Li Fang for dinner, but he didn't want to distract him after seeing the boss's sleepy look. Big Tiger asked if Li Fan was too sleepy to sleep, and the big guy replied that the big guy had thrown off his whole mood. There was a lot of food on the table waiting for the master of the house and all the girls who stayed here, and Yusei and Anyue were already at the table, waiting for everyone to start eating. Seo Kunlin brought up the last plates of food and the girls praised the doctor for his cooking skills. Li Fan also came, noting that it was not for nothing that Su Kong Lin was called a master of cooking and the best chef in this city. Li Fan said he was very hungry and didn't come alone, with Chong Li standing next to him in a hug. The girl stated that she would sit next to Li Fan because he was the head of the house, and all the most delicious dishes would be placed near him. Chong Li turned to An Yusa and asked the girl to give up her seat next to Li Fan. An Yue heard this and said that Chong Li thinks too highly of herself since she thinks her sister should give way to her. Chong Li said that there is no one who loves Li Fan more than her, and her desire to sit next to him is well-founded. And Yue called the girl shameless and asked Li Fan to chase her away as quickly as possible. Li Fan didn't get involved in the girl's argument and said that he just had no words for Saiken Ling's food. The guy said it's only a light roast, but it tastes awesome too. Li Fan looked towards An Yusei and said that he had never eaten anything tastier before. And Yue reminded Chong Li that Li Fan is her sister's husband, and it's Chong Li who should give way to her to sit next to him. Chong Li asked about where An Yusei was when Li Fan was left without money or a place to live. Chong Li said that she was the one who had been his support and backbone all along, after which she called Li Fan her husband. Li Fan thought that the girl had done well and become the master of the situation. However, he remembered that originally Chong Li had started dating him for the sake of cheating. Chong Li also reminded An Yusa that throughout their relationship, she never once referred to Li Fan as her husband. The girl said that if An Yusei had the courage to call her spouse her husband right now, she would give way to her. An Yusei didn't give in to Chong Li's provocation and said it was just a seat at the table. An Yusei said she didn't want to compete with the girl for a seat at the table and was willing to give it up. The girl got up from the table and said she would take the dinner to her grandfather first. She also asked not to wait for her. Following her, An Yue ran after her, asking to go to her grandfather's house with her sister. Li Fan asked Looney if he was the chef of some restaurant or maybe owned his own. The guy wanted to visit the chef and added that after the food he cooked, the other one just wouldn't fit in his mouth. Su Kong Lun explained to the guy that he doesn't work anywhere and doesn't have any restaurants of his own either. The doctor revealed that he was rejected by the culinary world because of his obsession with health food. The doctor said he was afraid because of the fact that he would soon have to leave the world of cooking. Su Kong Lun said that he was very happy that he was honored to cook a couple of dishes for Mr. Li Fan before he left. The guy heard the displeasure in the chef's voice and asked to be allowed to fund it. Li Fan said that such a talented chef should not give up his business, because if he was not accepted by the culinary world, Li Fan would accept him. The guy said that he will open a one-of-a-kind upscale restaurant, and Seo Kunlun will be its main face, and Li Fan is confident that they will be able to achieve what they want and make a fortune. Li Fan thought about how he had recently thought about how to establish himself, and didn't expect that he had the key to do so at his fingertips. Seiken Lun was greatly fired up by the idea, and promised that he would not let down Mr. Li Fang's expectations and turn the latter into the king of gourmet delicacies. The guy said he would soon go looking for a suitable location and pick a good day to open. And Yue heard what was being discussed at the table and also asked for Li Fan's help. The girl said that she had studied restaurant administration in America. Baby An also added that she is willing to work for a daily meal of food prepared in his restaurant. The guy pondered An Yue's suggestion, and at this moment a system came to him. The system alerted the guy that he had achieved the talent detection ability and was now due a reward. There was a small party in town to celebrate the opening of a new restaurant. The building of the restaurant looked quite solid and stood out even against the background of other expensive establishments. Today was opening day, and everything was ready to receive the first visitors. A joyful crowd of people passing by were discussing the opening of a new restaurant in their town. One man was interested in who would open this restaurant and was told it was Mr. Li Fan. Many rich and important people of the city came to congratulate Mr. Li on the opening. All the influential people in the city told Li Fang that he had pleasantly surprised them by opening his restaurant. Li Fan stood beside Chong Li and expressed his gratitude to those who had come and invited them to enter the hall. Chong Li moved closer to the guy to talk to him about the guests that had come. The girl noticed that each of them is a representative of high society. Also, he asked when the guy managed to acquire such acquaintances. Li Fan mockingly asked, did Chong Li really believe that he knew all of them? Guy explained that he met many of them at his own party. Most of the guests came uninvited, because everyone wants to get a glimpse of the owner of the county's most upscale commercial real estate. Li Fan also said that all people are practical, but it is the rich who are especially practical, because when you are strong, they tend to get closer to you. But when you are weak, they will try to trample you. Chong Li thought about being intimidated by Li Fan's energy today, but he's too cool. which means she didn't make the wrong choice. Also attending the unveiling was Bai Feng Huang, who said that she never thought she would ever have to feel the guy's power. The girl noted that the guy managed to succeed in such a short period of time. A surprised Changli looked at the girl and asked herself who she was. Li Fan said ironically, the Highland Flower Bai Feng Huang herself deigned to come down to see him. The girl congratulated the guy on the discovery and said she wanted to discuss with him more about the collaboration she had proposed earlier. Li Fan said that he had apparently passed the test and asked the girl to pass on, assuring her that he would approach her a little later. A jealous Changli heard that Li Fan was going to approach the girl later and started to get really angry. Li Fan heard a girl from the crowd praising him and calling him a very popular and successful gentleman. It was Chen Qing, who also came to the opening of the restaurant after recognizing the owner's name. Li Fan was happy to see the girl here and immediately went over to thank her for her visit. The guy recalled that he should have made one call and the Chen family had helped him immediately, and Li Fan himself had no time to thank them. Chen Qing explained that she helped the guy because she was sure she wasn't wrong about him. Li Fan said that she was definitely not wrong, and he would return the entire investment in 6 months, and the girl realized that she and the guy were talking about different things. Li Fan took Qing's hand and led her into the hall, saying that the opening ceremony would start soon and they were all waiting for it. Bai Feng Huang watched Li Fan escort Chen Qing into the hall with a bit of envy. Changli watched all the girls her lover had managed to talk to and realized that she had too much competition. Li Fan took the microphone in his hands and announced to all the guests that the ceremony would soon begin. The guy expressed his gratitude to those who supported him and those who tried to kill him, but in the end didn't. The lad grasped the solemn tablecloth with his hand and said that in time he would surely reach the top. Li Fan promised everyone on his side his patronage and support in all matters, and those who would oppose Li Fan and his family, he promised to quickly exterminate. The restaurant owner pulled the rag off the sign and announced the opening of his restaurant. Li Fan addressed all the subjects and invited them to his restaurant, the Emperor's House. Discontent was immediately heard in the crowd, for some people thought such a name was too arrogant. People didn't realize what kind of guy he was when he chose such a bold name. Others, however, realized that if a guy has that kind of confidence, he's definitely not as easy as he looks. Chen Qing said it was the first time she had seen such an unusual opening ceremony, with the owner challenging all the clans of this city. Changli looked at her lover with admiration and called the ceremony the best ceremony she could think of. And Yue didn't understand why Li Fan, as an economics student, doesn't tell him the advantages of his restaurant. After all, they have the best chef in town. Seekin Lun heard the girl's discontent and said that Li Fan definitely chose such a strategy for a reason and knows more of them. The chef explained that it was too ordinary to talk about the chef, and it was better to have a colorful ceremony. The more people would remember the restaurant's bold name. Li Fan really thought that the more people remembered his opening ceremony, the better his chances of a successful business. And Yue really thought that the guy was just acting rashly and arrogantly, but it turns out this whole thing had a plan. The crowd began to divide into those who liked the restaurant owner and those who thought he was an arrogant scumbag. Among the crowd were Li Fan's foes who came to deal with the guy. It was the people from the Wu family who asked the guy to come to them immediately. Wu Zongyan also came here with his men, and he harangued Li Fang for bringing his man to his side, who needed to be brought back. Li Fan mockingly asked the man if he wanted to play Russian roulette again, and said that unfortunately he did not have time for it now. Wu Zongyan asked the guy to stop showing off and asked if Li Fan had lured Siku Lun to his side. The scumbag demanded that the doctor be returned to him immediately, or else he would tear the entire restaurant into splinters and give Li Fan a funeral inside. Li Fan confirmed that he was able to lure the doctor to his side and said he would not bring him back. The guy told Wu Zongyan to not even dream of bringing back Siku Lun and asked him not to bother him. To Li Fan's rescue, the system had a small gift in store for the host. The choice before the guy became 2 abilities. One helped him in the fight, and the other called Nursing Mother and restores health. They can also be improved. Li Fan said that Big Tiger would be the one to fight, and so he would choose the recovery option. The system didn't understand why the guy chose recovery, because with the first option he would have been able to easily defeat the enemies. The guy joked about the system and said that a nursing mom is very scary in anger. The thugs pulled out their knives and pounced on the restaurant owner to get the bounty on his head. The bandits had successfully hit Li Fang's body with their blades, and the blood that came from his wounds clearly testified to that. Li Fan realized that although he had chosen the super recovery ability, being chopped was very painful. The bandits already thought they had dealt with the guy, so they began to move away from Li Fan. But on Li Fan's body it was as if there was nothing. Only the guy's clothes were affected by the cuts. The stragglers were perplexed at how the guy had survived this and began to look at him with great fear. The guys tried to slash at Li Fan again, but this time he had already dodged. The restaurant owner punched the offender in the jaw and called him a real wuss. Li Fan told the unexpected guests that those people would never be able to slaughter him. Even though the bandits didn't do any damage to the guy the first time, they still tried to attack him again. A huge pile of knives flew towards Li Fan, hoping to kill him. Blood was oozing out of the guy's body, and the thugs began to strike harder, aiming for important organs. Li Fan stayed alive and said that the bandits apparently didn't eat breakfast today, because their weak blows are unable to hurt him. The scumbags examined the guy on whom everything was healing quickly, and decided that Li Fan was not human, but a divine being. Li Fan activated super speed and scattered all of his assailants to the sides. The guys ran up to Mr. Nan and said that Li Fan was some kind of foul thing and couldn't be cut down. Wu Zongyan said he didn't believe in mysticism, but Li Fang managed to put a knife at the bandit's throat and said that he would believe it now. Li Fan told the thug that he was very lucky, because the guy doesn't want to spill blood at the opening ceremony of his restaurant. The guy explained that Saiken Looney's skill is the main draw of his establishment that no one can take away. Li Fan threatened the unexpected guest to get the hell out of here quickly if he didn't want to die. Mr. Wu said only the city's top authority figures could do business with him like that. Turning around, Wu Zongyan saw Chen Qing, who was looking straight towards Li Fan. Chong Li and Su Kong Lun were also waiting to see how Mr. Wu and Li Fang's confrontation would end. More badassery could see Big Tiger beating up one of his minions. Next, the man turned towards Li Fan and realized that he had no choice right now. Wu said he wouldn't do anything to the guy today, but also warned that he would be held accountable for all his actions. Li Fan told the man that he could do what he wanted, and he himself would wait for him here. Wu Zongyan summoned his men and ordered them to leave Li Fang's restaurant immediately. The guys didn't understand how they could just let a guy go and hoped they'd come in a much bigger crowd next time. Mr. Wu said the guy isn't easy to kill, but it's not worth dragging the Chenin and families into this. The guests immediately began to congratulate Li Fang for managing to fight off the mob of thugs and called him an influential authority. The guy realized that people just had to look at the commotion, but he couldn't kill Zongnan in broad daylight, for he would be sued. The guests began to be served Saiken Lun's specialties that had enthralled Li Fan back home. The guests also enjoyed the food and each expressed great respect for the chef. And Yue said that the best chef in the world had arranged such a wonderful banquet for them and asked them to forget about what happened to enjoy the food. People couldn't stop eating and everyone was bursting for more and more refills. A huge crowd of people rushed inside as soon as they heard the smell of Saiken Lun's fine food. Chen Qing, seeing people attacking the food in the restaurant heavily, decided to approach Li Fang. The girl told the guy that his business was just destined to become successful. The guy talked about how he is also confident about it, but first he needs to deal with all the enemies. Li Fan talked about having to proceed to the second step, and Chen Qing was excited to hear it. The dialogue was watched by Zhang Li, who was just bursting with jealousy. Chong Li decided that Chen Qing wanted to steal her lover Li Fang and take him to her place. Chong Li snatched Li Fan's hand and saying that the guests had been waiting for a long time, she led the guy away behind her. Li Fang abruptly felt sick and started to pass out right in Chong Li's arms. The guy lost his balance and fell right on top of the girl, resting his head on her chest. The guy could feel the girl's warmth and breasts, but his strength was starting to leave him. The boy imagined he had fallen headfirst into huge peaches, but he also felt intense pain. Li Fan woke up abruptly and decided to figure out what had happened to him, assuming that he had lost consciousness. Chong Li noticed blood on the guy's body and said he was badly hurt and needed to go to the hospital right away. Already in the hospital, the doctor said that although Li Fan was not seriously injured, but because of the severe pain, his body was now very weak. Seo Kunlun said that the guy was fine now, but he'd better keep his peace. Chong Li pinned the guy down and said that he scared her a lot and he asked her to let herself go. The doctor took the girl away from the guy and said they'd better leave so the boss could get enough rest. The exhausted Li Fan continued to lie on the bed and regain his strength. To the guy's rescue came a system that sensed he was in danger. Li Fan revealed that, as expected, the ability to recover had reached its limits. The system was surprised at the guy's guess that the recovery ability had its own limit. The girl guessed that this was the reason why the guy had stopped fighting with Wu Zongyan. The system praised the guy for his guesswork and called him a smartass. The choice in front of the guy was to increase any ability by 5 points and a reminder. While ability boosting and reminding are not contradictory, you can't select both of these options at the same time. Li Fan chose a reminder, deciding to put off improving his abilities for next time. The system accepted the choice and reminded the guy to urgently take control of the An family's company. The guy didn't understand why he should take control of the company if he was divorcing An Yusei, and Grandpa was already awake. Li Fan asked, "Does the system really want An Yusei and An Yue to want to kill the guy?" After a while, Li Fan changed his clothes and left his room. Seo Kun-lun was surprised to see a healthy guy after such a short time. The surprised doctor asked if the guy's wounds were okay and if nothing was bothering him. Li Fan explained that he had a special body, so his wounds healed very quickly. Plus he had customers waiting for him and couldn't lie here for long. The guy saw a lot of socialites standing in the middle of the hall chatting amongst themselves. Chong Li introduced Chen Qing Liu Ming and said that he was handsome, better than Li Fang. Chen Qing was not interested in the guy, and awkwardly said that she was happy to see Liu Ming here. Li Fan tried to understand what was going on, and felt that there was a strange atmosphere in the hall right now. Su Konglun asked why Chong Li is trying to introduce Miss Chen to some guy. Li Fan himself was also very wary after noticing Chong Li trying to set Chen Qing up with someone else. Liu Ming said that he often communicates with the Chen family. In addition, they are friends with Li Fan. Also, the guy offered Qing a drink. Chen Qing didn't really want to have a drink with Liu Ming, but she was afraid of appearing impolite, so she agreed. Chen Qing didn't want to spoil the opening ceremony, so she agreed with all the guests in the hall. But Li Fan came to the girl's rescue, snatching the glass of alcohol from Qing's hand. Li Fan said that Liu's family is in the business of selling adult products, and recalled that when he was a blogger, he helped his family promote the product. The guy threatened Liu Ming that if he ever tried to get someone drunk again under the pretext of their friendship, he would be destroyed. After threatening Ming, Li Fan ordered the guy to get the hell out of here immediately. Liu Ming was afraid to answer anything and quickly left the hall while Li Fan escorted him with a glance. Li Fan asked Chen Qing to ignore such people and assured that he would protect the girl from such people. Qing was amazed that the guy immediately realized that she didn't want to have a drink with that guy. Chong Li took Li Fan's hand and said that Ming was her friend. That's why she wanted them to meet Chen Qing. Li Fan realized that girls become unbearable when jealousy starts to eat them. The guy asked Chong Li why she then doesn't date that guy who is not worthy of Chen Qing. Chong Li was greatly shocked by such harsh words from her lover. Li Fan said Chen Qing is drunk and he will walk her home now and Chong Li can do what he wants. Chong Li got angry and said that Li Fan was too unfair in dealing with other people. Chen Qing was offended by the guy's words about her being drunk, and the girl said that she was still in a normal state. The guy put a finger to his lips, hinting for the girl to play along. Li Fang needed to go to his grandfather's house right now and pick up the stock documents with the will so as not to arouse anyone's suspicion. Chen Qing approved of the guy's plan, and Chong Li only had to stare at the couple's back. Bai Feng Huang told Chong Li that the most important thing for men is to keep smart girls around them. Bai Feng Huang said to the girl about how she was nothing else besides her looks. Chong Li was distrustful of Bai Feng Huang and said that her relationship with Li Fan is none of her business. Bai Feng Huang only laughed at Chong Li's words, so she put a finger to her chin. Mr. Chen was surprised that Su Konglun was able to heal the old man so quickly. Also, the man asked if the guy wanted to take Anne's company under his management. Li Fan said that he had already said that he would keep the Anne company intact until the old man awakens, but first he needs to use the shares to get rid of the Anne family's trash. The man realized that the boy wanted to cut all ties with the Anne family and suggested that he join the Chen family. Chen Qing didn't much like the fact that her father was being so direct about it to Li Fang. Li Fan said that you can't forcefully create a marriage. Besides, he is very young for his daughter. The disgruntled Li Fan realized that they wanted to take him as a son-in-law again, but the fate of the unhappy husband did not suit him. The man said that already today, Wu Zongyan bought out the shop in front of the Guy's restaurant. Mr. Chen asked, "Is it certain that Li Fan will come out victorious in this fight?" Li Fan said he will not hide, and Mr. Wu will stumble on his own levity, just need to observe. The guy stood up from behind his chair and said that he had to go now, then said goodbye to Mr. Chen. Qing said she would step aside for a bit to see the boy off, and her father nodded his head affirmatively. Mr. Chen thought about the fact that there was definitely a spark between his daughter and Li Fan, which meant that it was already possible to choose names for the grandchildren. The guy mentioned that the banquet wasn't over and suggested that the girl come back if she wanted to. Chen Qing said that the emperor would not be there, so there was nothing for her to go back for, and it was better to walk with him now. Li Fan said that only courtiers and concubines could follow the emperor. The guy asked the girl what she would rather be, a concubine or a courtier. Chen Qing spread her fingers, a little shy and finding it difficult to answer. In a trembling voice, the girl asked what would happen if she chose the role of a concubine. The lad joked that in that case he would have to go back to the chambers and choose a plaque with the name of the concubine he would spend the night with. Chen Qing was already sick of the guy's jokes and she decided to grab his shirt. The girl took matters into her own hands and kissed the guy passionately on the lips. Chen Qing asked the guy not to fool around and said that she was absolutely serious when talking to him. Seeing that Li Fan liked it, Chen Qing put her hands on his shoulders. The girl kissed the guy again and Li Fan realized that these were declarations of love. At first, the guy couldn't believe that Chen Qing had dared to confess her feelings to him and thought it was a dream. The girl looked at the guy in embarrassment and he tried to tell her something. Chen Qing revealed that Li Fan was the first man she opened her heart to. The girl also warned the guy that if he dared to reject her or resort to her tricks, she would kill him. The guy said he wouldn't dare do that, and the girl was able to catch him off guard. But he also remembered that she didn't like it when her father was matchmaking them. Chen Qing said that she liked it, she just tried to act with restraint. The girl said the guy's constant rejections drove her to do it, and if he hadn't taken matters into his own hands, she would have lost him. Just then, Li Fan looked at the girl and realized that she looked really cute. The guy took Chen Qing by the shoulders and prepared to confess his love to her himself. The system decided to intervene in the couple's relationship and warn Li Fang. The system warned the guy that if he entered into a relationship with Chen Qing, the plan to take control of An's company would self-destruct. A life that was recently established risks being changed again at Li Fang's peril. The couple was left standing in complete silence, while Li Fan faced the difficult choice of his future fate. Chen Qing gently reminded the guy about what he said about returning to the chambers, and then the girl bluntly said that she wanted to become a concubine for Li Fang. Li Fan didn't understand how such a humble girl could say such perverted words. The guy asked the girl if she was sure she wanted to be his, and would she regret it? The system warned its master not to succumb to the girl's charms, or all the work would go to waste. Chen Qing said that she doesn't live with regrets, and if she chose a guy, he will be her only man. Li Fan was even more imbued with feelings for the girl and realized that she really loved him. The guy grabbed Qing's hand and asked her to follow her, sending his fate to hell. Li Fan said that his life was only in his hands, but the system kept urging him to stay. At the hotel, the young couple had their first intimacy between the young couple, and Qing warned her companion that it was a first for her. The system realized that the animal instincts were too strong and it could not resist them. While the system was waiting for Li Fan with Qing, the two continued to make love. A full 3 hours later, the couple was already lying in each other's arms. Li Fan affectionately asked the girl if she was all right, and she replied that she was fine. The guy talked about being honest about his feelings, and Chen Qing replied that she felt it. With shouts, An Yusei burst into the room, angrily shouting out the guy's name. An Yusei saw her husband lying in bed with another girl and decided to tell off the lovers. The girl reminded Chen Qing that Li Fan was still her husband, and they were not divorced yet. Li Fan said that there is no need to play up the drama as their divorce is only a matter of time. The guy said that Chen Qing is his girlfriend and they don't need An Yusei's approval. An Yusei saw that things are not the same with Chongli and Li Fan really has feelings for Chen Qing. An Yusei said that the guy had already thrown her out of his life, but would he even forget about Grandpa? The girl tried to soak up the self-pity and said that this would be an important lesson for her. With tears in her eyes, An Yusei wished her husband long and happy days together with Chen Qing. The guy didn't know exactly how to respond to his wife's words, so he just fell silent. Chen Qing decided to intervene in the happily married couple's relationship herself and kissed Li Fan. The girl said that she rushed things so Li Fan can go back and take her time because she will wait for him. A surprised Li Fan looked at his lover and couldn't believe that she was letting him go. The guy got dressed and got into the car with An Yusei while Chen Qing watched them from the window. Chen Qing said that she was wrong about An Yusei when she called the girl insensitive. Li Fan made An Yusei's heart flutter, except the guy himself had already fallen at Chen Qing's feet. Chen Qing said that even though the old man's intervention might delay the divorce, but in any case, Li Fan would become completely hers. The couple headed to Grandpa's room and Li Fan said that now was the time to talk things over with him. The guy was about to open the door to the old man's room, but he was stopped by An Yusei, who grabbed his arm. The girl became a body in front of the door and asked, "What is Li Fan trying to do?" The guy was really pissed off that the girl was resisting so he wouldn't talk to the old man. And Yusei recalled that the boy himself had asked her not to disturb her grandfather while he was recovering from his illness. The girl told the guy that the topic of divorce can be very traumatizing to an unraised old man. Li Fan told his wife that she did not want to bring up the topic. The guy said that An Yusei had always looked for the slightest opportunity to break up with him, but was now against it. Had she really fallen in love? An Yusei denied everything and called the guy's words nonsense that he made up himself. Li Fan said that strong people should never retreat. No matter how it is, they have no future together. The boy's hand reached for the doorknob again. An Yusei asked, "Is her spouse really that much in love with Chen Qing?" Li Fan replied that it wasn't that, but that he didn't like An Yusei at all. The guy entered the room and asked about Grandpa An's condition. The old man beckoned the lad over to him and motioned for him to quickly take a seat next to him. Li Fan said that Wu Zongyan is preparing to open his shop across the street from his establishment. The guy also revealed that Uncle An also has a stake in the Wu family's business. Li Fan also narrated that Ding An was involved in what happened to the old man. Li Fan said that Uncle An is still the old man's son, so he can't do something to him without his consent. Grandpa angrily called Ding An a traitor and became sharply disappointed in his son. The old man hugged the guy and said that he didn't need his permission because he was an integral member of the An family. Li Fan tried to talk about the divorce with An Yusei, but the old man said that he felt abruptly sick. Grandpa hid under the blanket and said that he needed to rest, then chased Li Fan away. Li Fan realized that the old man was actually faking and noted his poor acting, but the guy decided that he should still start by putting the An family in order. Plus, after the divorce, he won't be allowed to raise his hand toward Ding An. Li Fan called Wang An and asked if he had received the picture he had sent. The guy asked me to make a couple huge posters for the night. Li Fan remembered about the opening day at Wu Zongnian's shop, so he prepared a worthy gift for it. Li Fan also told Wang An that the larger the scale of the posters, the better. The next morning, Wu Zongnian's shop opened opposite the Imperial House establishment. The guy was beckoning visitors to the new culinary palace, which has all the specialties and much cheaper prices than the establishment across the street. One of the visitors to Li Feng's restaurant heard about the opening of the new establishment. The man tossed his wands aside. The man said his neighbors have prices twice as much and asked why he should overpay twice as much. Another customer also said that this restaurant will ruin him soon, and Yue asked all the diners to remain calm and talked about how their dishes are unique, so their price is justified. The man was unhappy that the workers had nothing to offer for such a large price. The visitor glared at An Yue's breasts and started hinting at how they could keep customers, and Yue asked, what could they do to make customers satisfied with their establishment? The man asked to drop the prices and put a beauty at each table to keep the customers company, then grabbed onto An Yue. The girl asked the customer to remove her hands, but the customer told her to kiss him so the man would be satisfied with her establishment. But Li Fan himself decided to intervene in this dispute and punch the insolent visitor. Li Fan said that such scumbags deserve to eat only slop, and their establishment does not welcome such customers. The man told Li Fan that a new restaurant across the street from him was thriving, and he still dared to raise his hand at customers.